It begins softly, like the sound of sand shifting under a cool desert wind. You are not hurried here. You are safe, wrapped in a quiet blanket of night, with only the soft glow of an imagined lamp beside you. The flame flickers gently, casting warm shadows, and I lean closer, my voice low, so only you can hear. I promise, there are no surprises in this journey, only gentle discoveries, each one a stepping stone across the sands of ancient time. Tonight, we walk together into the land of the Pharaohs, and we do so slowly, without fear, without weight. And yet, before we even step inside a temple or gaze at a pyramid, I must share something with you. Because for years I thought of Egypt as a kingdom of stone, hard, cold, eternal. But here is the twist, and it may feel small at first, though it changes everything. Most of what Egypt was, what people touched, wore, ate, sang, and whispered to one another, was not stone at all. It was fragile. Bread warm from clay ovens, linen fluttering on washing lines by the Nile, children chasing geese in muddy courtyards, the creak of wooden boats, the quiet scratching of reed pens on papyrus. The pyramid survived, yes, but the daily heartbeat of Egypt was soft, ordinary, human. That is the Egypt I want to show you, the one that lived alongside the colossal monuments, like the faint perfume that lingers longer than the flower. Stay with me, because in a moment you'll see why this matters. If you close your eyes, you may already sense a paradox. We remember Egypt through its eternal stone, yet life itself slipped between the stones like water, flowing, vanishing, leaving only echoes. Tonight we'll chase those echoes, not with urgency, but with patience, like a quiet friend strolling beside you by moonlight. Imagine the Nile at dusk. The water is glassy, mirroring the pale lavender of the sky, and the last calls of ibises rise like prayers. You hear the soft dip of oars, the low murmur of voices carrying across the current. A fisherman pulls in a net that glitters with silver, and somewhere a woman hums, soothing her child to sleep. You see, before pyramids reach the heavens, life unfolded here, simple, rhythmic, cyclical. The river gave bread, and bread gave comfort, and comfort gave people the strength to carve monuments that would outlast themselves. Let's turn the lamp a little lower and think of the first Egyptians who gazed at the desert and decided to build something permanent. They were not magicians of stone. Not yet. They were farmers, bending their backs to plant barley, measuring the floodwaters with simple rods, watching the stars to know when to sow. They wore sandals of woven reeds, carried baskets of figs, ground flour with handstones, and sighed at the ache of daily labor. In their homes, laughter mingled with smoke from oil lamps. Their gods were close and ordinary, a cat, a crocodile, the warmth of sun. And here is another gentle twist. The first pyramid builders did not know they were building wonders. To them, these were offerings, quiet bridges to the divine. It was later, when centuries had passed, that people like us stood before them and marveled at the impossible. So as we begin this story, I ask you to see the pyramids not as cold miracles of engineering, but as a final breath of countless unseen days. Days of baking, weaving, sweeping, carving, dreaming. In a moment, I'll take you to the very first pyramid. But for now, just rest with this thought. Eternity is built from the ordinary. You may wonder, as the desert wind cools around us, why people gave so much of themselves to stone. Why did they place their faith in these rising shapes when life itself was fleeting? The answer is layered, like the limestone blocks they hauled. Part of it was reverence, an attempt to honor kings who were seen as living gods. Part of it was protection, believing that stone could shield the soul's journey after death. And part of it, perhaps, was love, a desire to anchor memory against the relentless tide of time. Stay with me here. Breathe slowly. Picture the workers on the Giza Plateau, not as faceless thousands, but as men and women like us. Some hauled blocks, yes, but others baked bread in clay ovens, brewed beer thick with barley, stitched linen to clothe tired bodies. Their songs rose with the sun, steady as the rhythm of hands pulling rope. If you lean closer, you might even hear the sound. The slap of mud plaster, the thud of mallets on wood, the laughter of someone slipping in wet clay, quickly brushed off with a grin. In a moment, I'll show you the story of a single man who left his name scratched into the wall of a worker's barracks, a name almost forgotten, except for the luck of survival. But before that, Let's pause together in the quiet. Feel how safe it is here, with the night drawing close, the lamp warm, the air slow. You're not rushing through history. You're strolling, breathing, lingering. Now let me tell you about that man. His name, as far as we can read it, was Mary. He was a worker at Giza, and he left behind a simple graffito on stone, nothing more than his name and the symbol of his work crew. That's all, and yet it tells us something profound, that the pyramids were not raised by slaves in endless suffering, as old myths claimed, but by ordinary laborers who had families, homes, and pride in their craft. Mary was part of a rotating workforce, fed and sheltered, and when he etched his name, he was perhaps tired, perhaps amused, perhaps simply wanted to say, I was here. Isn't it strange how a single scratch name can change our vision of a civilization? The twist I gave you earlier, that Egypt is more fragile, more ordinary than its stone monuments, unfolds again here. Behind the grandeur of the pyramids are names, voices, and footsteps we almost never hear. And tonight, in this story, I want to hold them close for you, to make their quiet lives glow like fireflies against the endless desert. As you breathe more slowly, notice how the rhythm of the Nile begins to echo in your chest. That river, steady for thousands of years, was Egypt's heartbeat. Without it, there would be no kings, no tombs, no gods. With it came barley, papyrus, fish, reeds, birds, and the soft mud that cooled bare feet. The flood each year was both blessing and challenge, feared and awaited. And in that cycle, Egyptians felt the presence of eternity, a pattern that mirrored the rising and setting of the sun. Stay with me a little longer. Imagine sitting on the riverbank as the stars come out. The night air smells of damp earth and wood smoke. You hear frogs croaking, crickets whispering, and the creak of a boat rope against a wooden post. A child curls against their mother, clutching a toy carved from scrap wood. In this ordinary moment, the seeds of pyramids are sown, not from visions of grandeur, but from a culture that found divinity in the patterns of everyday life. And so, here is the invitation of our journey. As we move through these chapters, you'll walk among pharaohs and gods, yes, but you'll also sit at humble hearths, share bread with workers, stroke the fur of temple cats, and lean into the wind of desert nights. You'll see the pyramids rise, but you'll also understand the hands that placed each stone, the hearts that beat beneath the linen, the voices that sang into the dusk. I promise you a gentle story, and that is what this will be, a story where curiosity is soft, like a stream meandering, and where every answer brings not tension, but ease. By the end of tonight's path, you'll not only see the pyramids differently, you'll feel them as part of the tapestry of life, fragile and enduring at once. And now, let's draw this opening to a close with a promise. In Chapter 1, we will step carefully into the world of the very first pyramid, the Step Pyramid at Saqqara. But when we arrive there, we will not stand far off like tourists. We will walk among the courtyards, hear the footsteps echo, and touch the cool stone under moonlight. And in that place, the twist of Egypt as ordinary and extraordinary at once will deepen. For now, let the lamp flicker lower. Let your breath slow and hold this thought. Eternity begins in the smallest of moments. Close your eyes now, and let us drift together further into the desert night. We are leaving the gentle bend of Nile, though its pulse still beats behind us, steady and reassuring. Ahead, beneath the moon's soft glow, a shape rises as older than the pyramids you may know from pictures or postcards. It is stepped like a staircase of the gods, reaching not smoothly into the sky but in careful layered platforms. This is the Step Pyramid of Saqqara, the first of its kind, the beginning of Egypt's long romance with stone that touches eternity. You might think of pyramids as timeless, unchanging, but here, at Saqqara, you can sense the experiment of it. Before this, kings were buried in mastabas, low rectangular tombs of mud brick, heavy but humble. Imagine a field of them, rising like benches across the sand, their surfaces plain, their interiors quiet. Then came an idea, whispered in the mind of an architect named Imhotep. What if, instead of one mastaba, you build another on top of it, and then another and another like a ladder, not just a house of the dead, but a stairway for the soul, guiding the king upward, closer to the gods. Stay with me here. Breathe gently. The twist of this place is that while it looks like pure stone, it was born of clay dreams. Imhotep was a man of extraordinary vision, yes, but also of ordinary hands, walking the same dusty paths as the builders, listening to the same winds. He took what Egypt already knew, mud brick tombs, stacked storage jars, flat roofs, and turned them into a miracle of stone. It wasn't magic. It was memory, reshaped and magnified. And you, standing here in the moonlight, would notice something else. The pyramid is not isolated. Around it lies a great enclosure wall, carved to mimic the reed mats and wooden posts of everyday houses. In stone, the familiar textures of daily life become eternal. Look closely. The niches cut into the wall resemble the woven panels of reed huts, the same huts people built by the river. Isn't it comforting? Even in stone, the Egyptians wanted their kings to feel home, surrounded by the echoes of what was ordinary and warm. Let's walk a little closer, slowly, letting our feet sink into the cool sand. Hear the hush of your own breath. Picture the courtyard that opens before you, vast and echoing under the stars. In daylight, it would have dazzled with ceremonies, priests in linen, processions of offerings, the hum of sacred hymns. But at night, it is still, the stone walls glowing faintly with moonlight, the silence broken only by the whisper of the desert wind through narrow passages. Stay with me, because here is something gentle yet astonishing. This pyramid is over 4,600 years old, older than the pyramids at Giza, older even than most of the great myths we know today. And yet, the handprints of its builders remain. Chisels' marks, joints between blocks, places where stone was smoothed by human touch. It is vast, yes, but also deeply personal. Each block was laid by a person who sweated under the sun, who sipped water from a clay jar, who perhaps thought of their family as they placed their stone. When you let your thoughts wander there, the pyramid feels less like an alien wonder and more like a quilt stitched by countless hands. In a moment, I will tell you more about Imhotep himself, the architect whose name still echoes after millennia. But first, let's pause in one of the colonnaded corridors leading into the complex. These columns, carved of stone, are shaped like bundle reeds, just as if someone had tied real stalks together with twine. Only here, the reeds will never wither, never crack, never fade. They stand forever in the moonlight, stone pretending to be plant, eternity imitating fragility. Breathe here for a while. Isn't it soothing to think that what we hold dear in the present, the textures of homes, the sway of reeds, the comfort of the ordinary, was what they also sought to preserve forever? And now Imhotep, his name, meaning the one who comes in peace, is carved into history not only as a builder but also as a healer, a scribe, a priest. He was advisor to King Djoser, the ruler buried beneath the step pyramid. Imhotep is one of the very few commoners to be remembered by name in such early times. Later ages revered him as a sage, even as a god of wisdom and medicine. But in his own life, perhaps he was simply a man with an idea, a man who dared to suggest that mud brick could become limestone, that impermanence could be transformed into something enduring. Stay with me here, because in a moment I want to show you the heart of this pyramid, not just its skin. Beneath the step layers lies a labyrinth of tunnels, chambers carved deep into the earth, where Djoser's body was placed, wrapped in linen, resting among treasures meant to sustain him in the afterlife. Imagine walking through those corridors by torchlight, the air cool and still, the walls close, the flicker of flame revealing carved patterns of stars, lotus blossoms, and falcons. It was not meant for the living, yet we can follow the thought that even in darkness, the king should feel surrounded by beauty, order, and light. And now, quietly, let's step back into the open air. Look again at the pyramid's shape, rising tier by tier. Do you see how it resembles steps leading upward? Some believe it was intended as a staircase of soul, guiding Djoser toward the sun god Ra, or perhaps into the embrace of the sky goddess Nut. In the stillness of night, it feels almost like a dream frozen in stone, the desire to climb beyond life, to rest among the stars. Let's draw closer to the everyday world for a moment. Around Saqqara, archaeologists have found traces of the workers' village, the homes of those who labored here. Small mud brick houses, hearths with traces of ash, pottery shards from cooking jars, beads and amulets tucked into the earth. Picture those workers at dawn, stretching the chill air, sharing bread baked the night before, their hands rough from pulling ropes. They were not nameless slaves. They were farmers, masons, carpenters, called into service for a season, fed with bread and beer, given a place to sleep. Their children played in the dust. Their wives spun flax into linen. Their songs drifted across the desert night. Isn't it tender to think that while kings sought eternity in stone, these families found eternity in simple joys? Breathe with me, slowly. Imagine yourself as one of those workers, walking by moonlight back to your house. You smell smoke from cooking fires, hear the low hum of voices sharing stories. Feel the soft linen of your tunic against sunburned skin. You glance at the pyramid rising behind you, and perhaps you feel pride or awe, or simply the ache of your muscles. You cannot know that millennia later, people across the world will still whisper your story. But perhaps you sense dimly that you are part of something larger than yourself, a thread in a tapestry that will never fully fray. And now, gently, let's close this chapter circle. We began with the step pyramid, the first of its kind, an experiment that became a revolution. But beneath its grandeur lies a truth that will guide us through all of Egypt's history. What lasts forever is built from the fragile, the ordinary, the human. Stone imitating reed mats, pyramids rising from mud-brick dreams, eternity carried on the shoulders of farmers. In the next chapter, we will journey northward to Giza, where the most famous pyramids rise. But before we leave, linger here a little longer. Feel the cool stone of the corridor under your fingertips. Hear the desert wind sighing through broken walls. See the moonlight bathing the steps in silver. Rest here, safe, unhurried, knowing that you carry with you not only the image of stone, but the heartbeat of the people who built it. The desert night stretches on, calm and endless, as we leave behind Saqqara's stepped terraces and drift slowly northward, toward the plateau of Giza. You may already picture the pyramids there, their triangular silhouettes rising sharp against the horizon. Yet I want you to see them not through the eyes of modern travelers, cameras in hand, but as someone who arrives in the old kingdom might have seen them, when their limestone casing still gleamed like the pale gold of dawn, smooth and radiant, dazzling to the point of blinding under the sun. Breathe with me, slowly, as the sand crunches softly beneath our feet, and imagine that first glimpse. It would have felt like stepping into a dream sculpted from light. Stay with me, because here is something many people don't know. The Great Pyramid you imagine today, its steps bare and weathered, was once dressed in polished white limestone, cut so precisely that the blocks fit tighter than your fingernail could slip between. Under the blazing Egyptian sun, those stones reflected the light with such brilliance that the pyramid looked less like earth and more like a frozen beam of sunlight. At night, under a full moon, it glowed softly, like a lantern guiding the soul of the king across the sky. Isn't it soothing to think of a pyramid not just as stone, but as light, alive with the rhythm of day and night? Now, let us pause a moment in the quiet. We are standing on the plateau itself, a rise above the river valley, where the breeze moves more freely, carrying the scent of sand and faint traces of cooking fires from workers camped below. The plateau is wide, stretching flat and solid, chosen carefully by the architects. For here, the ground was strong limestone bedrock, able to bear the unimaginable weight of millions of stone blocks. If you listen closely, you might almost hear the deep hush of that rock, holding steady beneath thousands of years. In a moment, I'll tell you about Khufu, the pharaoh whose pyramid is the largest here, and about the mysteries that still cling to his name. But before that, let's wander gently among the workers who made this place alive. Imagine dawn breaking on the Giza Plateau, the air cool, the horizon painted with soft hues of rose and gold. From the workers' village below, people stir. Fires are stoked, bread baked, beer thick with barley ladled into jars. Men and women stretch their limbs, preparing for the day's labor. Children laugh in the courtyards, chasing one another through narrow alleys, before their parents call them back to carry water or fetch tools. This is not the story of faceless slaves toiling in misery, as old myths once claimed. It is a story of community, rotating in and out with the seasons, fed, housed, proud of their work. Their graffiti still lingers on the stone, names of work gangs, jokes, small signatures of presence. Each mark says, softly, we were here. Stay with me, because here comes a gentle revelation. While the Great Pyramid is colossal, its base covering 13 acres, its original height taller than a 40-story building, the work was not endless chaos. It was carefully organized. Teams of workers hauled blocks along sledges, the sand dampened with water to ease the drag. Overseers coordinated the rhythm, like conductors guiding a symphony. Bakers produced loaves by the thousands. Brewers stirred vats of beer. Herders delivered cattle for meat. Life here was not just labor. It was community, ritual, even play. Archaeologists have uncovered gaming pieces, tiny dice-like objects, suggesting that in the evenings, after the sun sank and their bodies rested, workers played games, shared stories, sang songs to the same moon you imagine now. And now Khufu, his reign, over 4,500 years ago, is veiled in both grandeur and mystery. Some saw him as a mighty builder, a ruler who dared to anchor his soul in stone of such scale that no one since has surpassed it. Others whispered of him as harsh, a king demanding more than his people could bear. The truth, as with so much of history, lies somewhere between shadow and light. What we know is this. He marshaled resources across Egypt to create something that has endured beyond imagination, and his pyramid stands still, though his body has long since vanished. Breathe slowly, because here is a soft curiosity. The king's burial chamber lies not beneath the pyramid, as one might expect, but hidden within, reached by ascending passages. Deep inside, the corridors stretch narrow and steep, polished granite-forming walls that echo with silence. The great gallery, tall and sloping, feels like a canyon inside the stone. To walk through it, torch in hand, would be feel the weight of the entire mountain of limestone pressing above, and yet also the care of human design that keeps it standing. Isn't it soothing to think that architecture can hold not just stone, but silence itself, like a vessel filled with air and reverence? Stay with me a little longer. Outside, near the pyramid, the Sphinx reclines, carved from bedrock, its lion's body stretched in eternal stillness, its human face gazing eastward toward the rising sun. Though the details of its face have softened with time, in the old kingdom it must have seemed vivid, its eyes sharp, its colors painted. Imagine the morning sun cresting the horizon, gilding the Sphinx's cheeks, filling the valley temple below with golden light. It would have felt like the land itself was alive, watching, protecting, breathing with the people. And yet, here is a quiet twist. For all the grandeur of Giza, much remains uncertain. We do not know the exact details of how the pyramids were built, how ramps were placed, how blocks were lifted. The workers' organization, the angles of the passages, the alignment with the stars, all are known partly, but not wholly. Isn't it strange and comforting that even the greatest monument of stone still carries mystery, like a lullaby we can hum but never fully sing? That mystery itself becomes part of the calm, the unhurried rhythm of history. Now, let us soften our gaze again. Picture evening on the plateau, long after the day's labor has ended. Fires burn low in the workers' village. The air smells of roasted fish, of bread cooling on stone, of smoke drifting into the starry sky. Workers sit in circles, passing cups of beer, humming songs that sway like reeds in the wind. A mother cradles her child, whispering a story of the sun god Ra, who sails across the sky each day in his golden boat. The child drifts into sleep, safe in the warmth of her lap, the distant silhouette of the pyramid glowing under moonlight. In this moment, the grandeur of kings and the tenderness of families blend seamlessly, each sustaining the other. And now, slowly, let's close the circle of this chapter. The Great Pyramid rises above us, immense yet gentle in the silver light, no longer a mystery of numbers or engineering, but a poem carved in stone. Around it lies a hum of life. Bakers, brewers, children, mothers, laughter, music, rest. The pyramid survives because it was born not only of ambition but of community, woven from thousands of small, ordinary acts of care and craft. In a moment, we will move onward to the next age of Egypt, to pyramids beyond Giza, to stories of kings and queens who followed. But for now, rest here in the calm presence of this ancient mountain of light, and let your breath mirror the timeless rhythm of the Nile. The night is still wide, and the moon lingers above the plateau as if reluctant to leave. You and I take one last look at the Great Pyramid. its quiet enormity glowing like a mountain of silver, and then we begin to drift onward slowly, as though carried on the soft current of time itself. For even as Khufu's pyramid towers, Egypt does not pause. Generations pass, kings rise and fall, and the building of pyramids continues. Each new shape a whispered change, each new stone a note in the long lullaby of eternity. Stay with me as we move gently through the years. After Khufu, his son Khafre builds nearby, his pyramid smaller only in comparison, though still vast enough to leave you breathless. At its base sits the great Sphinx, guarding the complex with its leonine grace. And then comes Menkaure, his pyramid more modest in scale, its casing once of granite polished to a soft sheen. Together, these three pyramids of Giza form a family, standing side by side like guardians of a dream. But beyond them, the story of pyramid building begins to shift, and here lies the gentle twist of this chapter. Pyramids, once perfect and smooth, begin to crumble not from neglect alone, but from the changing heart of Egypt itself. Let's breathe slowly and walk onward to Dashur, another plateau not far from here. In the moonlight, you would see strange silhouettes rising against the sky. One, the bent pyramid of Sneferu, looks as though it is bowed mid-ascent, its angle shifting halfway up, as if the builders changed their minds or were forced to adapt when cracks appeared. And nearby stand the red pyramid, its smooth sides intact, glow with a faint hue of sun-baked limestone. These are the experiments of an earlier age, when architects still tested the language of stone. But they remind us that even the greatest endeavors are touched by trial and error, by adjustment, by learning. Isn't it soothing to think that even monuments can carry mistakes, and yet those mistakes shine just as beautifully in the night? Now let us move further forward, to the Middle Kingdom, many years after Giza's glory. Kings still build pyramids, but now they are smaller, their cores made of mud brick faced with stone, vulnerable to the passage of time. At places like Lish and Illahun, you can almost feel the fragility, the walls crumbling like dried bread, the outer casing long since quarried away. Yet within them, the chambers remain carved, inscriptions linger, and the echoes of rituals still drift faintly. Stay with me here, because there is comfort in this. Egypt's devotion to eternity never faltered, even as its methods changed. They still sought permanence, even when the material softened. Breathe gently, and picture what these later pyramids meant to the people who built them. No longer towering mountains. They were humbler, but perhaps more intimate. Around them grew temples, courtyards, villages, each filled with a hum of daily life. Workers brought offerings, priests recited prayers, families lived nearby, their lives intertwined with the fate of the stone. Imagine walking in the early dawn past such a pyramid, hearing the chant of priests, smelling incense curling into the cool air, seeing women carrying baskets of bread as offerings. The pyramid stood not in isolation, but as the heart of a living landscape, pulsing with devotion. And now, let's pause on a quiet revelation. Over time, pyramids were no longer the sole resting places of kings. Rock-cut tombs grew more common, hollowed into cliffs and valleys. The Valley of the Kings would later rise in importance, its hidden tombs offering secrecy where pyramids had offered grandeur. Isn't it curious and calming that eternity itself could shift shape, that the same yearning for permanence found new forms, as if Egypt's heart whispered gently, "We can endure differently now?" Stay with me, because here's another gentle thread. Even as pyramids shrank and crumbled, their memory grew larger. Stories spread of the golden age of Giza, of Khufu and Khafre and Menkaure, of the step pyramid of Djoser, of Sneferu's bold experiments. For the Egyptians, remembering was another way of building, another kind of stone. Memory itself became a monument, preserved not only in blocks but in words, in chants, in the steady rhythm of rituals repeated year after year. And memory, as you know, is softer than stone but can outlast even it. Let's walk together through one of these later pyramid complexes. Lish, perhaps, under the quiet glow of stars. The walls are broken now, the passageways filled with sand, but if you lean in close, you can still see traces of hieroglyphs, lines etched into plaster, the symbols of gods and kings. You hear the faint rustle of the desert breeze through the ruins, almost like the whisper of voices long gone. Perhaps it is the voice of a priest reciting prayers for the dead. or of a scribe noting the deliveries of bread and beer, or of a child laughing as they play among the stones. Even ruins can be alive when you listen softly. And now, let's re-engage gently with a promise. Earlier, I told you that eternity is built from the ordinary, and here you can feel it again. The mud brick pyramids crumble because they were made of the same clay as homes, the same earth used for ovens and pots. Kings sought to anchor themselves in eternity, but they did so with the same materials their people use daily. Isn't that tender? That the divine rested on the same clay as a human, that eternity and daily bread were kneaded from the same soil? Pause with me now. Picture a pyramid rising at dawn, priests laying down offerings of figs and honey, workers carrying jars of beer, women weaving garlands of lotus blossoms to drape before the altars. The pyramid glows faintly, not as towering as Giza, but surrounded by a world alive with ritual. In this moment, grandeur and humility meet. The pyramid is less eternal than its predecessors, but the life around it pulses just as brightly. And so, gently, this chapter draws us toward transition, from the grand experiments of Saqqara and Giza, to the fragile mud brick of the Middle Kingdom, to the hidden tombs of the Valley of the Kings yet to come. The story of Egypt's eternity shifts like sand in the wind. But the yearning remains constant, to connect earth to sky, human to divine, life to the everlasting. That yearning is the true pyramid, invisible, but rising endlessly. In our next chapter, we will walk deeper into that yearning, into the Valley of the Kings, where mountains hide secrets in their cliffs and darkness itself becomes a monument. But before we go, rest here. Look at the crumbling shapes of Lisht and Dashur, softened by moonlight, their stones scattered but their spirit intact. Hear the night birds call, feel the cool air brush your skin, and know that you are safe, unhurried, part of a rhythm older than time. The desert is darker now, the stars clearer, the moon sliding lower as if guiding us onward. We drift gently south along the Nile, leaving the open plateaus of pyramids behind. The river narrows here, pressed by cliffs of golden limestone, and the air grows stiller, quieter, as though time itself holds its breath. We arrive at Thebes, where later pharaohs built their temples of glory, and just beyond, in the western desert, lies the Valley of the Kings. Stay close with me, because this place is different. It is not a land of towering pyramids rising into the sky, but a hidden landscape, where eternity was carved in secret beneath the earth. The twist of this chapter is subtle but profound. By the New Kingdom, the pharaohs abandoned pyramids entirely. They sought not to reach for the heavens in plain sight, but to bury their bodies deep within the cliffs, unseen, guarded by silence and stone. Why? Perhaps they had learned from centuries of tomb robberies, when no pyramid, however vast, could protect treasures from eager hands. Perhaps they understood that eternity did not need to stand against the horizon. It could be tucked into the folds of the earth itself. And so, in the Valley of the Kings, grandeur turned inward, hidden beneath the desert skin. Breathe slowly, and let us walk into the valley itself. The cliffs rise steeply on either side, pale limestone glowing under the starlight, their surfaces rough, weathered, streaked with shadows. The valley floor is narrow, winding like a dry riverbed, scattered with stones that crunch softly underfoot. It is quiet here, almost unnervingly so, but in this stillness you feel a kind of embrace, as though the mountains themselves are guardians, keeping the secrets of kings safe. Above the valley towers a peak shaped uncannily like a pyramid, as though nature itself offers symbol of eternity, even when human hands turned away from building one. Stay with me, because we are about to descend into one of these tombs. Imagine a narrow entrance cut into the cliff face, half hidden by rubble. Nothing grand to announce what lies within. You step inside, torch in hand, and the air changes instantly, cooler, stiller, carrying the faint scent of dust undisturbed for centuries. The passage slopes gently downward, walls close in around you. On them, painted in rich colors, are scenes of gods and journeys, hieroglyphs of prayers, images of the king before Osiris, before Ra, before the countless deities who guide him into the afterlife. Pause here, and let your eyes linger on those paintings. The blues are deep as twilight, the reds warm as sunset, the gold shining like candlelight. You see stars painted on ceilings, lotus blossoms unfolding across the walls, falcons soaring with wings spread wide. It feels less like a tomb than a dream captured in pigment, a reassurance that death was not an end but a continuation, a passage from one realm to another. Isn't it soothing to think that even in darkness, the Egyptians filled the space with light and color, surrounding their kings with beauty? In a moment, I'll tell you about some of the most famous tombs here, of Seti, of Ramses, of Tutankhamun. But first, let's breathe slowly and imagine the workers who carved these chambers. They were known as the servants in the place of truth, and they lived in a village nearby called Deir el-Medina. These were not slaves or temporary laborers, but skilled craftsmen, families who devoted their lives to cutting and painting the tombs. In the evenings, they returned to their homes, cooked meals, told stories, and played with their children. They left behind ostraca, fragments of pottery with sketches, notes, even jokes that show their humor, their frustrations, their everyday lives. In their careful hands, eternity took shape. Stay with me here, because here is a gentle revelation. The tombs were not meant to be seen by the living. Once sealed, they were intended to remain closed forever, hidden beneath the desert. The colors, the prayers, the images were painted not for our eyes, but for the king's soul to guide him safely. Yet by chance, by excavation, by curiosity, we now walk where only gods and pharaohs were meant to tread. Isn't it strange and calming that these secrets outlasted millennia, waiting quietly in the dark until revealed again? Let's move softly into the tomb of Seti I, one of the most beautiful ever discovered. The corridors stretch long, descending deeper and deeper, the walls alive with painted figures, the ceiling studded with stars. As you descend, you feel as though you are moving from the world of the living into the sky itself, the darkness filled with constellations. In the burial chamber, the sarcophagus rests, carved of alabaster, glowing faintly in the torchlight. The silence here is profound, the kind of silence that feels like it is weight, pressing gently on your ears, reminding you that you are surrounded by eternity. And now, Tutankhamun. His tomb, discovered in 1922, was small compared to others, yet it captured the world's imagination because it remained almost intact, filled with treasures. Imagine opening a sealed chamber after 3,000 years and seeing golden shrines, statues, jewelry, and the famous golden mask. But beyond the splendor, remember the intimacy. This was a resting place of a young boy king, who ruled briefly, who likely laughed, cried, and dreamed just like any child. His treasures dazzled the world, but his story whispers of fragility, of youth cut short, of eternity sought in gold because life was brief. Stay with me, because here is the quiet heart of the Valley of the Kings. Unlike pyramids, which declared eternity boldly, these tombs whispered it softly, hidden under layers of rock. The Egyptians believed that life after death required secrecy, ritual, and protection. The tomb was a cocoon, wrapping the king in images and prayers, guiding him like a lullaby into the next world. Walking here by torchlight, you feel not fear but calm, as though you are moving through a sacred dream. Now let us return gently to the surface. The stars blaze more brightly after the tomb's darkness, and the valley feels even more silent, as though holding its breath around us. The cliffs rise like guardians, the pyramid-shaped peak glowing faintly under moonlight. Somewhere nearby, jackals move quietly, their paws soft on the sand, their eyes catching the starlight. The air is cool, carrying a faint smell of stone and desert plants. You feel safe here, not because the valley is open, but because it is closed, secret, sheltered. And so, softly we close this chapter. The Valley of the Kings marks a turning point in Egypt's story, from pyramids that reached outward to tombs that turned inward, from monuments of light to monuments of shadow. Yet both were born from the same yearning, the same gentle desire to anchor memory and soul beyond the reach of time. In the next chapter, we will walk to the temples of Thebes, where the living honored God with grandeur in the open air, even as kings rested in secret below. For now, let the silence of the valley cradle you, steady and eternal, a lullaby sung by stone itself. The stars are still above us, steady and quiet, as we leave the Valley of the Kings behind. The cliffs fade into shadow, and the Nile comes back into view, its silver current winding like a ribbon through the darkness. On the eastern bank rises Thebes, ancient city of temples, a place where the living honor gods beneath the open sky. While the tombs were hidden, meant for silence and secrecy, the temples were vast, open, filled with voices, rituals, and light. Here the pharaohs and priests reached not downward into the earth, but upward, their offerings rising with the smoke of incense into the heavens. Stay with me, because here lies a gentle twist of this chapter. Egypt was not only about death. It was just as much about life, about the rhythm of sunrises, festivals, processions, and prayers. The pyramids and tombs whisper of eternity, yes, but the temples of Thebes thundered softly of the present moment. Each day a sacred cycle, each dawn a chance to honor the gods who made life possible. Let's begin with Karnak, the largest religious complex ever built in ancient Egypt, and perhaps in the world. Imagine walking through its first pylon, a monumental stone gateway, as the early morning sun casts golden light across its walls. You step into a vast courtyard where priests gather, offerings of bread, beer, flowers, and fruit laid carefully before the statues of gods. The air is filled with the sweet smoke of incense, the sound of chanting, the rustle of linen robes. But it is not chaotic. The rhythm is steady, like breathing. The priests purify themselves, light the lamps, pour the libations. Each action, small and simple, becomes part of a grand cycle meant to mirror the order of the cosmos. Breathe slowly now, and let us walk deeper into Karnak, into its hypostyle hall. The columns rise like a forest of stone, more than 100 of them, each carved with hieroglyphs, their capitals blooming like papyrus flowers. Sunlight filters down between them, shafts of gold cutting through the dimness, illuminating carved figures of gods, kings, and symbols. You tilt your head back and see the columns towering above, so tall they seem to hold up the sky itself. Isn't it soothing to imagine walking here in silence? The air cool and shadowed, the stone scented faintly of incense and dust? The hall feels less like a building and more like a dream of the primeval marsh from which the Egyptians believed creation itself began. Stay with me, because I want to show you something quieter within Karnak. Beyond the vast courtyard and halls lies a sacred lake, its surface still, reflecting the sky. Priests would bathe here in ritual purification, washing away the dust of the mortal world before approaching the divine. At night, under the stars, the lake becomes a mirror of eternity, the constellations trembling on its surface. You and I can stand at its edge now, the water dark and calm, the air cool against our skin, and feel the same hush the priest must have felt. Even in grandeur, there is always this gentleness, this return to quiet. Now let's walk down the avenue that links Karnak to Luxor Temple. For nearly 2 miles, the path is lined with sphinxes, each carved from stone, their bodies crouched in eternal stillness, their faces turned forward. Imagine a festival day, when the sacred bark Ammonius, the chief god, was carried along this avenue in procession, priests chanting, people singing, flowers and garlands thrown along the path. The avenue itself became a bridge between temples, between gods, between hearts. Tonight, though, under the stars, it is empty, silent, the sphinxes glowing faintly with moonlight, as though waiting patiently for the songs to return. At the other end lies Luxor Temple, smaller than Karnak, but no less profound. Step into its courtyard, where colossal statues of Ramses II once stood, gazing forward with serene faces. The walls glow faintly in the night, their carvings alive with images of kings embraced by gods, offerings held high, rituals eternalized in stone. Beyond lies the inner sanctuaries, where the statue of Ammonius once rested, hidden from public view, tended only by priests. Imagine the stillness of that chamber, the oil lamps flickering, the air heavy with incense, the sense that the god himself was present in the silence. Pause here and notice the contrast. In the Valley of the Kings, everything was hidden, sealed away for eternity. In Thebes' temples, everything was alive, renewed each day. The Egyptians did not separate life and death. They wove them together like threads in a linen cloth. The temples ensured that life continued, that the sun rose, that the Nile flooded, that order prevailed over chaos. The tombs ensured that the dead were safe, that the king's soul journeyed on, that eternity remained unbroken. 2 halves of the same whole, balanced like the 2 banks of the river. Stay with me here, because there is another gentle truth in these temples. They were not built in one lifetime. Karnak, for example, grow over more than 1,000 years, each pharaoh adding his own hall, courtyard, pylon, carving his name into the stone. Imagine that, generation after generation. People working on a project they would never see complete, trusting that their children and grandchildren would continue. Isn't it soothing to think of time stretched that way, of lives flowing into one another like the Nile's current, each carrying the story a little further? And now, let us slip into the atmosphere of a festival at Thebes. Picture lanterns lit along the river, boats decorated with flowers, priests carrying the bark of Ammonius across the water from Karnak to Luxor. Crowds gather on the banks, clapping softly, singing hymns, sharing food. The night air smells of lotus blossoms, honey cakes, roasted fish. The moon reflects on the river, turning the boats into glowing shapes that drift silently along. The festival is both grand and intimate, a reminder that the gods live not in stone alone, but in the joy of people gathered together. Breathe slowly, and imagine yourself standing on the edge of the courtyard at Luxor Temple after the festival has ended. The crowds have gone home. The boats are docked. The lamps burn low. The temple is quiet now, its columns casting long shadows, the air warm and still. You hear the faint rustle of linen robes as priests close the sanctuary, the soft call of a night bird, the gentle lapping of the Nile. It feels as though the temple itself is breathing with you, slow, steady, eternal. And so, gently, we draw this chapter to a close. The temples of Thebes remind us that Egypt was not only about death, not only about pyramids and tombs. It was also about life renewed daily, about rituals, offerings, songs, and festivals. The gods were honored not in secret chambers alone, but in the open courtyards, under sun and stars alike. In the next chapter, we will walk south to Nubia, where the pharaohs carved temples into cliffs and left their mark on new lands. But for now, rest here in Thebes, in the cool shadow of columns, the soft reflection of stars in the sacred lake, the calm rhythm of chants fading into night. The Nile stretches long and steady beneath us, its waters darker now as the night deepens. We drift southward, past fertile fields and villages, past quiet groves of date palms, into the lands once called Nubia. Here the cliffs rise steeper, the desert presses closer, and the river feels like a lifeline through the wilderness. The stars above are brighter, sharper, as though they too lean closer to see what lies in this frontier land. And it is here, carved directly into stone cliffs, that pharaohs left their most enduring marks. Temples that seem to be part of the earth itself, yet glow as though alive. Stay with me, because here lies the soft twist of this chapter. While the pyramids pointed upward, visible from miles away, the Nubian temples turned inward, hidden in cliffs, yet no less radiant. They were not built for burial, but for presence, for the gods to dwell among the living, and for the pharaohs' names to echo in distant lands. These temples were statements of devotion and also of belonging, reminders that Egypt's reach stretched southward, carried by the river and anchored in stone. The most famous of these is Abu Simbel, built by Ramses II. Imagine approaching at dawn, the cliffs bathed in pale light, and there, seated against the rock, for colossal statues of Ramses, each over 60 feet tall, staring outward with serene faces. They sit shoulder to shoulder, carved directly from the mountain, their gaze fixed on eternity. At their feet, smaller figures of queens, children, and gods cluster like attendants. The sheer scale is overwhelming. But in the quiet of night, as we imagine it now, the statues soften under the moon, their features gentler, their shadows long across the sand. Let us walk closer, slowly, as though the sand itself asks us to tread carefully. The entrance lies between the statues, a dark doorway that leads into the heart of the mountain. Step inside, and the cool air greets you, heavy with the stillness of stone. The first hall is vast, its ceiling supported by carved pillars shaped like osiride figures of the king, arms crossed, holding the crook and flail. The walls are alive with scenes of Ramses in battle, of gods bestowing life upon him, of rituals frozen in vibrant relief. Torchlight flickers, bringing movement back to these images, as though the gods themselves shift in the shadows. Stay with me, because here comes a quiet marvel, twice each year, at dawn, on February 22nd and October 22nd. The rising sun aligns perfectly with the temple's entrance. Its rays travel down the long axis of the hall, piercing the darkness, and illuminate the statues in the sanctuary at the back. 3 of the 4 gods seated there, Ramses himself among them, are bathed in sunlight. Only Ta, god of the underworld, remains in shadow. Isn't it soothing and astonishing that stone and light can converse this way, that architecture itself becomes a kind of hymn to the sun? Breathe slowly, and imagine standing there at dawn during one of these alignments. The air cool, the hall filled with anticipation. Priests chanting softly, the first beam of golden light creeping along the floor, touching the statues one by one. For a few brief minutes, the darkness is transformed into radiance, and then, just as slowly, the light retreats, leaving the sanctuary in shadow once more. A rhythm, steady as breath, repeated every year for centuries. Now, let us step gently outside again. Next to the great temple of Ramses lies a smaller temple, dedicated to his queen, Nefertari, and to the goddess Hathor. Its facade is adorned with 6 statues, 4 the king and 2 of the queen, all nearly the same height. An extraordinary gesture, for queens were rarely shown equal in scale to kings. Inside, the walls glow with scenes of Nefertari offering to Hathor, the goddess of love, music, and joy. Imagine the music that might once have filled this place. Harps, sistrums, voices rising in hymns. Even now, in silence, the air seems to hum with that softness. Stay with me here, because there is another gentle truth. These temples of Nubia were not only monuments of power, they were bridges between cultures. Nubians lived here too, trading, marrying, sharing in rituals. The temples were symbols of Egypt's presence, but they were also places where gods, languages, and lives mingled. Isn't it common to think of the Nile not as a border, but as a thread weaving different peoples together, binding them with water, stone, and song? Let's pause now and picture a festival day at Abu Simbel. The dawn sun rises. Priests carry offerings of bread, beer, and flowers. Music swells in the courtyards. Families gather, children holding garlands of lotus blossoms, the smell of roasted meat and honey cakes drifting through the air. The colossal statues glow with sunlight. The interior shines with torches. The voices of hundreds rise together in hymns. And yet, for all the grandeur, imagine the quiet moments. A mother soothing her child, a worker leaning against a temple wall to rest, a priest adjusting his linen robe in a breeze. Eternity again woven from small gestures. Breathe gently with me now. Beyond Abu Simbel, other temples dotted Nubia, at Kalabsha, at Amada, at Dur, each carved into cliffs, each dedicated to gods and kings. Their walls speak of devotion, of conquest, of gratitude. Today, many of them stand on new ground, carefully moved stone by stone when the Aswan High Dam threatened to drown them under the rising waters of Lake Nasser. Isn't it tend to think that even in our modern age, people gather together to save these ancient stones, carrying them to higher ground so they could continue to whisper their stories? And so, as the night lingers and the river flows steady, let us rest here in Nubia for a while. The cliffs glow faintly under the stars. The statues of Ramses and Nefertari sit silent and serene. The temples breathe with memory. This is the edge of Egypt's ancient world, yet it feels no less eternal. In the next chapter, we will return to the heart of Nile, to the daily lives of farmers and villagers, those whose hands and hearts sustained all these monuments. But for now, feel the hush of the cliffs, the calm gaze of the statues, the steady rhythm of the river. You are safe here, unhurried, surrounded by stone that listens as much as it speaks. The river glimmers softly under moonlight, and now, instead of cliffs and colossi, let us follow its gentler banks, where villages nestle close to the water's edge. For while kings built temples and carved monuments into stone, most Egyptians lived quieter lives, plowing fields, grinding grain, weaving linen, and raising children whose laughter echoed against the mud-brick walls of homes. Stay with me, because the twist of this chapter is simple yet profound. The pyramids and temples were extraordinary, but they were possible only because of the ordinary, the daily lives of farmers, bakers, and craftsmen whose steady rhythm sustained Egypt for thousands of years. Breathe slowly with me, and picture dawn along the Nile. The mist rises off the water in delicate ribbons, the air cool, scented faintly of wet earth and reeds. A farmer wakes, stretches, and steps outside his mud brick house, where geese squabble noisily and a donkey brays. His wife kneels beside a small clay oven, feeding it with straw as she bakes flat loaves of bread. Their children chase each other to the courtyard, bare feet kicking up dust, their giggles ringing like bells in the morning air. The household stirs, not with grandeur, but with comfort, with familiarity. Now imagine the farmer taking his plow, a simple wooden tool pulled by oxen, and leading it into the dark, fertile soil along the riverbank. The earth is rich with silt left behind by the Nile's annual flood, soft and easy to turn. As he works, the morning sun warms his back, and birds will overhead, calling to one another. He plants barley and wheat, crops that will become bread and beer, the staples of Egyptian life. The rhythm of the plow, the creak of the harness, the steady crunch of hooves, all blend into a lullaby of labor, the same song sung generation after generation. Stay with me, because here comes a general revelation. Bread was the true pyramid of Egypt. Every worker who hauled stone, every priest who lit incense, every child who played in the courtyard was sustained by bread. It was baked daily, eaten fresh, carried in baskets to fields, temples, and tombs. Alongside it came beer, thick and nourishing, brewed in clay jars, flavored with dates or herbs. Without bread and beer, the pyramids could not rise, the temples could not stand, the gods could not be fed. And so, in every humble kitchen, women were builders of eternity too. Let us pause inside one of those kitchens now. The room is dim, lit by a small oil lamp. A woman grinds grain on a flat stone, pushing a handstone back and forth. The sound steady and soft. The flour gathers in a bowl, mixed with water, shaped into small rounds. She places them in a clay oven, where they bake quickly, filling the room with a warm, comforting smell of bread. Beside her, a child crushes herbs with a pestle, helping in small ways, learning through touch and repetition. The air is smoky, the walls blackened with soot, but the mood is tender, unhurried. This is eternity too, the taste of fresh bread at dawn, the warmth of a meal shared. Now, let's step outside into the village streets. The houses cluster close together, built of sun-dried mud brick, their walls rough, their roofs flat. People greet each other as they pass, carrying baskets of figs, jars of water, bundles of flax. A potter spins his wheel, shaping clay into jars. A weaver stretches threads on a loom, the shuttle clacking softly back and forth. A fisherman repairs his nets, humming a tune as he knots the cords. Children run errands, carry messages, or simply chase each other in games that echo down the narrow alleys. Life here is not silent, but full of voices, laughter, footsteps, and the low murmur of daily tasks. Stay with me here, because here's another quiet twist. While kings are remembered in stone, ordinary people lived lives that slipped away like water through fingers. Few names survive, few faces remain. Yet their presence was constant, like the river itself. They fed, clothed, and built the Egypt that endured. If you listen closely, you can almost hear their whispers. The sigh of a tired mother, the laugh of a boy splashing the Nile, the call of a farmer urging his oxen forward. These sounds may have faded, but they are still here, in the rhythm of history. Breathe slowly, and let us walk to the fields again at midday. The sun is high now, the air hot, the earth dry beneath bare feet. Workers bend low, harvesting grain with sickles made of flint set into wooden handles. Their movements are rhythmic, steady, their bodies glistening with sweat. They sing as they work, songs to keep the pace, to lighten the effort, to remind one another that the day will pass and evening will bring rest. In the distance, the river sparkles, a reminder of life's constant gift. And when the work is done, they return home. In the evening, families gather on the flat rooftops of their houses, where the air is cooler, the stars bright above. They eat bread, drink beer, share fish roasted over small fires. Someone tells a story of gods and heroes, their voice low and steady. Children leaning close with wide eyes. A cat slinks by, hoping for scraps, its purr blending with the soft night. The village hums gently, a chorus of voices, until one by one the sounds fade into sleep. Stay with me a little longer, because I want to show you something tender, the toys of Egyptian children. Archaeologists have found them. Dolls made of cloth, little carved animals, balls of woven reeds. Imagine a child clutching one of these as they drift asleep, safe under the watch of their parents. The night air cool through open windows. Life may have been hard, food simple, work endless, but love, play, and comfort were present too. And isn't that soothing? That across thousands of years, the laughter of children remains unchanged? Now, let's visit the marketplace of a larger town. The air is full of scents, spices, grilled fish, fresh bread, sweet dates. Stalls line the street, shaded by woven mats. Merchants call softly, offering jars of honey, bolts of linen, necklaces of beads. Donkeys bray, dogs bark, voices mingle. People haggle gently, exchanging goods, stories, and smiles. The marketplace is alive with energy, yet not frantic. It feels more like a steady heartbeat, the pulse of community. Here, Egypt is not stone or ritual, but flesh, voice, and presence. And now, softly, let's close this chapter. The pyramids and temples may awe us, but it is in these villages, kitchens, fields, and marketplaces that Egypt truly lived. Eternity was not only in the monuments, but in the daily bread, in laughter on rooftops, in cats curling at their master's feet, in songs rising with the harvest. In the next chapter, we will turn to the scribes, the keepers of words, those who wrote down prayers, stories, and records so that memory itself could last forever. But for now, rest here in the village, in the warmth of shared bread and quiet voices under the stars. You are safe, surrounded by the hum of life, as steady as the Nile's eternal flow. The night deepens, and the Nile glows faintly, carrying us onward like a dark ribbon of silk. We leave behind the fields and marketplaces, though their voices linger in the air like fading music. Now we enter a quieter space, one filled not with the rhythm of oxen or the clatter of markets, but with the soft scratching of reed pens on papyrus, the rustle of scrolls, the low murmur of thought turned into writing. Stay with me here, because the twist of this chapter is gentle but profound. While stone monuments tried out last time, it was fragile ink on papyrus that carried Egypt's voice through the centuries. Breathe slowly and picture a scribe at work. He sits cross-legged on a low stool in the shade of a mud brick wall, or perhaps within the cool interior of a temple office. Before him lies a sheet of papyrus, pale and smooth, rolled out upon a wooden board. In one hand, he holds a slender reed pen, its tip cut to a fine point. In the other, a small palette of pigments, black made from soot, red from ochre, each mixed with water. He dips the reed into the ink, steadies his breath, and begins to write. The strokes are swift yet precise, a dance of curves and lines that form the sacred hieroglyphs. Stay close, because this is not just writing. To the Egyptians, words were alive. They believed that to write the name of a person or a god was to give it permanence, to anchor it in the world. A name erased was a life diminished, a memory undone. But a name written was a life preserved, carried forward even after death. Isn't it soothing and humbling to think that eternity could be held in a single brushstroke? Now let's step gently into House of Life, the temple library, where papyrus scrolls are stored in niches and cupboards. The air is cool, scented with ink and parchment, the flicker of oil lamps casting warm light across shelves of rolled papyri. Here scribes copy texts, hymns to God, medical treatises, stories of kings, mathematical tables, poems of love. Each scroll is fragile, easily torn, yet together they hold the heartbeat of Egypt's wisdom. Imagine walking through this place in silence, your fingertips brushing the smooth rolls, the whisper of eternity held not in stone, but in words. Breathe slowly, because I want to show you the world outside the temple too. In villages and workmen's towns like Deir el-Medina, scribes kept records of food rations, wages, and supplies. They wrote on ostraca, shards of pottery or flakes of limestone, where quick notes, sketches, or calculations could be made. Some ostraca carried doodles, playful drawings, even jokes. One shows a cat serving a mouse, a reversal of nature, drawn perhaps to amuse a weary worker. Isn't it comforting to think that even in a world of gods and kings, humor still found a place, carried by a scribe's playful pen? Now let's lean closer into a papyrus scroll and see the texts themselves. Some are prayers, hymns are Osiris or Hathor. Some are instructions, guiding how to measure fields or calculate grain. Some are wisdom texts, gentle advice for living a good life. Be kind to your friends. Listen before speaking. Honor your parents. And some are stories. The tale of Sinew, where a man flees Egypt and longs to return. The story of the shipwrecked sailor, where a lone traveler meets a talking serpent on a magical island. These stories, soft and timeless, remind us that Egyptians not only built for eternity, but dreamed and imagined just as we do. Stay with me, because here comes another quiet revelation. Hieroglyphs, the sacred script carved into temples and tombs, were only one of the ways Egyptians wrote. For daily life, they used hieratic, a cursive script, swifter and more practical, flowing like the river itself. And later came demotic, even simpler, used for contracts, letters, and ordinary records. Each script was a voice, tuned to its purpose, carrying the same heart of language in different forms. Isn't it common to think of writing as a river too, branching, flowing, changing shape, yet always carrying the same water thought? Let us pause now at the side of a young apprentice scribe, sitting beside his teacher. The boy holds a reed pen awkwardly, ink smudges on his fingers. The teacher corrects him gently, guiding his hand, showing how to make the line straight, the curve smooth. Day after day, the apprentice copies texts over and over until the signs become second nature, flowing from his hand without thought. He dreams, perhaps, of one day working in a temple, or serving a noble, or even recording the words of a king. His life may not build pyramids, but his pen will build memory. Breathe slowly, and let us think of the Book of the Dead. It was not a single book, but a collection of spells, prayers, and instructions meant to guide the soul through the afterlife. Written on papyrus and placed in tombs, it told the deceased how to navigate the dangers of the underworld, how to speak before the gods, how to have their heart weighed against the feather of Ma'at. Imagine the comfort these words must have brought. The idea that, with the right guidance, the journey after death would be safe, ordered, assured. Words became not only memory, but protection, like a lamp glowing in the darkness. Stay with me, because here is the soft heart of this chapter. Papyrus was fragile, yet it carried eternity. Unlike pyramids, which weathered wind and sand, papyri could crumble with a touch, vanish in fire, or rot in damp. Yet by miracle of desert dryness, some survived, rolled tightly in tombs, buried in sand, waiting to be found. When unrolled today, their fibers crackle, their ink still dark, their words still alive. A voice from thousands of years ago speaks again, softly, clearly, as if it were written yesterday. Isn't it tender and soothing that something so delicate can outlast centuries, bridging time more powerfully than stone? Now let us return gently to our scribe at work, the lamp flickering beside him, his hand steady, his eyes calm. He does not know that millennia later, we will still read his words. He writes because it is his duty, his calling, his way of serving gods and people alike. The room is quiet, the only sound the scratch of the reed, the soft rustle of papyrus. Outside, the village hums with life. But here, in this small room, eternity is being shaped in ink. And so, softly we close this chapter. Egypt was not only built in stone, it was written in words, fragile yet enduring. The scribes, often invisible behind the kings and priests, were the true guardians of memory. They preserved hymns, prayers, stories, wisdom, laughter. In the next chapter, we will walk into the world of artisans and craftsmen, those who painted the walls of tombs and carved the statues that still gaze at us today. But for now, rest here with the scribe, listening to the soft scratch of pen on papyrus, the ink flowing like the Nile, steady and eternal. The night air is steady, cool, carrying us onward as the Nile glimmers softly beneath the stars. We've lingered with the scribes, listening to the whisper of reed pens on papyrus, but now we drift toward a different kind of quiet artistry. Not words, but images, not scrolls, but walls. Egypt's artisans and craftsmen were the makers of memory in color, stone, and form. Their work clothed tombs, temples, and statues with beauty meant not just for the living, but for eternity. Stay with me, because the gentle twist of this chapter is that while kings took the credit, it was countless unknown hands that shaped Egypt's enduring face. Breathe slowly, and picture a workshop in Deir el Medina, the village where artisans of the Valley of the Kings lived. The sun is just rising, casting pale light over mud-brick homes arranged neatly on a slope above the desert. Within the village, the air hums softly with the start of the day. In one house, a sculptor sharpens his chisel on a block of sandstone. In another, a painter grinds pigments, red from ochre, blue from ground azurite, green from malachite, mixing them with water and gum to make paint. Children run errands, carrying jars of water from the well, while women knead bread or weave linen. This is not a place of grandeur, but of steady, daily devotion to craft. Now, let us walk into a tomb under construction. The entrance cuts into the cliff, cool air spilling out into the desert heat. Inside, the walls are raw stone, freshly carved, dust still clinging to the air. By torchlight, workers chip away with copper chisels, smoothing the surfaces, marking guidelines with red ink. The space echoes faintly with the rhythm of mallets and chisels, the low murmur of voices, as men coordinate their efforts. It is laborious, yes, but also careful, precise. They know that soon these walls will be covered with scenes of gods and journeys, and their work will last beyond their lifetimes. Stay with me, because here comes a tender moment. A painter kneels before a section of wall, his palette resting on his lap. He dips his brush, a reed with frayed fibers, into black ink and sketches the outline of a figure, a falcon-headed Horus, his wings spread wide. Then, with calm patience, he fills the form with color, layering red, blue, and green. Around him, other painters work in harmony, each assigned their part. Outlines fills details. The walls bloom slowly into vibrant life. Fields of lotus, boats sailing under the sun, kings embraced by gods, stars painted across ceilings like a sky of eternity. Imagine standing there, torch in hand, watching the stone transform into a dream. Isn't it soothing to know that beauty can be built layer by layer, one gentle stroke at a time? Let's pause in the sculptor's workshop now. Blocks of limestone and granite lie stacked in corners, half-shaped statues emerging from their surfaces. A sculptor chips slowly, methodically, the sound of stone meeting chisel echoing in the room. Dust rises, catching the lamplight. Nearby, an apprentice polishes a nearly finished piece, rubbing it smooth with sandstone. The statue is a seated scribe, cross-legged, a papyrus roll on his lap. His eyes are inlaid with quartz and copper, shining as though alive. The sculptor leans back, wipes his brow, and studies his work. He does not know if his name will be remembered, but the statue will endure, gazing out at strangers thousands of years hence. Stay with me, because here lies another gentle truth. Artisans often left their own marks, hidden yet present. In Deir el-Medina, ostraca were found with sketches, practiced drawings of gods, animals, even playful caricatures. Some were never meant for tomb walls, just exercises or amusements. One ostracon shows a cat playing a harp, whimsical and charming, proof that even in the service of eternity, laughter was close at hand. Isn't it comforting to know that the same hands that painted solemn gods also doodle for joy? Now let's step into a completed tomb chamber, its walls glowing with fresh paint, its carvings sharp and vivid. Imagine standing in the burial chamber of a noble, the ceiling painted deep blue with golden stars, the walls covered with scenes of daily life and the afterlife intertwined. You see fishermen casting nets, women grinding grain, children playing, alongside gods weighing hearts and guiding souls. Life and eternity blend seamlessly, as though one flowed into the other. The artisans captured not just the grandeur of kings, but the warmth of everyday existence. Breathe slowly and think of the tools themselves. Chisels of copper and later bronze, brushes of reeds, pigments ground from earth and stone, palettes worn smooth from use. These were not elaborate, but simple tools wielded with skill and patience. The artisans' bodies bent under the labor, their hands calloused, their eyes strained by lamplight in underground chambers. Yet from this effort bloomed art that still glows with color after millennia. Isn't it soothing to think that beauty can emerge from such humble tools, shaped by devotion rather than luxury? Stay with me a little longer, because here is a quiet twist. While kings' names are carved everywhere, the artisans of Deir el-Medina left records of their own lives too. Osaka revealed complaints about late wages, notes about illnesses, even small disputes. Their voices survive in fragments. A man writing of a missing cloak, another of his sore eyes, another of his hunger. These are not voices of grandeur, but of humanity, ordinary lives behind extraordinary art, and in their ordinariness lies something eternal. Now imagine evening in Deir el-Medina. The work in the tombs is finished for the day, and the artisans return home. The air cools as the sun sinks. Families gather in courtyards. Bread is shared, beer poured, stories told. Some men sketch by lamplight. Others play senet, a board game with carved pieces. Children fall asleep in their mother's arms. Cats curl on doorsteps. The village hums softly with comfort. In the distance, the cliffs loom, hiding the tombs where their artistry waits in silence. Life here is modest, but filled with warmth. And so, softly we close this chapter. Egypt's beauty was not only in pyramids and temples, but in the hands of countless artisans whose names we may never know. They painted stars to guide souls, carved statues that still gaze at us, sketched gods and cats alike. Their work was fragile, yet it endures, glowing across time. In the next chapter, we will step into the world of priests and temples again, hearing the chants and rituals that gave life to stone. But for now, rest with the artisans, surrounded by paint, chisel, and laughter, knowing that eternity is not only grand, but crafted by gentle, steady hands. The river is calm tonight, its surface like glass, carrying the moon in silver reflection. We drift toward the great temples once more, though this time, not as visitors gazing at their vast walls, but as quiet companions of those who served within them. Priests, dressed in pure white linen, shaved clean, walked softly to the courtyards and sanctuaries, performing rituals that nourish not only the gods, but the very rhythm of the cosmos. Stay with me, because the twist of this chapter is gentle yet profound. While kings built the temples, it was the daily, unseen work of priests that kept Egypt's spiritual heartbeat steady, as constant as the Nile. Breathe slowly, and picture dawn at Karnak. The first light of the sun rises over the pylons, casting long shadows across the temple's vast courtyard. Inside, the priests begin their tasks. They bathe in the sacred lake before entering, washing away the dust of the mortal world. They clothe themselves in fresh linen, sandals left aside, their feet bare upon the cool stone floors. Silence fills the temple, except for the faint sound of birds waking in the reeds. The rituals must begin, for Egypt's balance might depends on them. Now, let us follow one priest as he enters the innermost sanctuary, where the statue of Ammonius rests in a small chamber. The air is dim, heavy with the smell of incense. The priest carries a small oil lamp, its flame wavering, casting golden light on the blackened walls. He approaches reverently, murmuring prayers under his breath. With careful hands, he opens a shrine that holds the god statue. The figure is small, no larger than a man's arm, yet to the Egyptians, it is the very presence of divinity. The priest bows low, offers bread, beer, meat, and fruit, pours libations of wine and water, and anoints the statue with oil. He dresses in fresh linen, adorns it with jewelry, and lights incense so the sweet smoke curls upward like a prayer made visible. Stay with me, because here comes the heart of the ritual. After the offerings, the priest steps back, leaving the chamber silent once more. The god has been nourished, honored, awakened for the day. Outside, life continues. Farmers in fields, children in courtyards, but within these stone walls, eternity has been tended like a lamp kept burning. The ritual is not for spectacle, not for crowds. It is intimate, steady, daily. Isn't it common to think that even the divine was cared for gently, like a guest welcomed into a home? Let's step softly into the larger temple spaces now. Priests chant hymns in unison, their voices low and steady, echoing among the towering columns. The words praise the sun, the river, the gods who bring order from chaos. The sound rises and falls like waves, rhythmic, soothing, filling the air like a lullaby. Scribes nearby record offerings, while temple workers prepare more incense, bread, and jars of beer. Everything has its place, its rhythm, its order. Just as the Nile floods each year, the rituals repeat each day, keeping the universe steady. Breathe slowly, Because here is another gentle revelation. Priests were not permanent in their office. Many were ordinary men who rotated in and out of temple service, working a few months before returning to their fields or families. They were trained in rituals, but they lived ordinary lives outside the temple walls. Imagine one such man, working the land by day, then, when his turn came, donning fresh linen and serving the God at dawn. His life bridged the sacred and the everyday, reminding us that divinity was never far from daily life. Now let us pause in the cool shadow of a temple courtyard during a festival. This is when the hidden rituals burst into public view. The sacred bark, a gilded boat carrying the god statue, is lifted onto priest shoulders. The people gather in crowds, singing hymns, clapping, throwing flowers. The air smells of lotus blossoms and incense, the sound of sistrums jingling in rhythm with chants. The god is carried out of the sanctuary, down the avenue of sphinxes, to visit another temple, another shrine, another god. Imagine the joy of the crowd, the feeling that heaven itself had stepped into the streets. And yet, even in this grandeur, the movements are slow, the rhythm steady, the atmosphere calm, as though the gods prefer a song sung like a lullaby. Stay with me here, because here comes a tender detail: incense. The Egyptians believed that its smoke carried prayers of the heavens, a bridge between worlds. They used frankincense, myrrh, cinnamon, and local herbs, mixing them carefully, burning them in small braziers. The smoke curled upward, fragrant and soft, filling the air with sweetness. Imagine breathing it in now. The warmth, the spice, the faint resinous note, and feeling a calm settle over you. Incense was not only for gods, but for people too, soothing, purifying, steadying the spirit. Now step with me into the temple library again, the house of life. Here priests copy hymns, rituals, and medical texts. One scroll describes how to mix herbs for healing, another how to perform a ritual for protection. The walls hum with quiet industry, the scratching of pens, the whisper of pages turned. In one corner, a young priest practices his chants, repeating them over and over until his voice is steady, his rhythm unbroken. Outside, the world is noisy, but inside, words, smoke, and silence weave together like threads and linen. Breathe gently, because here's the soft truth. For the Egyptians, the line between the divine and the human was thin, almost translucent. The gods needed care, but in return, they cared for the people, bringing floods, fertility, health, and protection. The rituals were exchanges of love, of duty, of balance. The priests were the keepers of that balance, moving silently through stone halls, keeping the rhythm of life and eternity in harmony. Now imagine evening in the temple. The sun has set, the air cool, the shadows long. Priests close the shrine, snuff out the lamps, sweep the floors clean. The sanctuary is silent again, the statue resting in darkness, waiting for dawn. Outside, the sacred lake reflects the stars, the water trembling with a breeze. The temple sleeps, but tomorrow, at first light, the cycle will begin again. Isn't it soothing to know that eternity is not only vast and unreachable, but daily, steady, repeating like breath? And so, softly we close this chapter. The priests of Egypt may not have built pyramids or carved statues, but their hands and voices kept the gods alive in the hearts of the people. Through incense, chants, and offerings, they wove a rhythm of devotion that steadied the world. In the next chapter, we will follow the Pharaoh himself, not as a distant god-king, but as a man with rituals, burdens, and humanity. But for now, rest in the temple's shadow, the incense still lingering in the air, the chants echoing like a lullaby beneath the stars. The Nile glimmers in the faintest light of dawn, and we drift toward the palace. Unlike the temples and tombs, this space is alive with daily motion, filled not with gods and sanctuaries or artisans and workshops, but with courtiers, guards, servants, and at the heart of it all, the Pharaoh himself. Stay with me, because the twist of this chapter is gentle but illuminating. Though pharaohs were seen as divine, embodiments of Horus on earth, they also rose with the sun, bathed, ate meals, played with children, and felt the weight of decisions that touched every life in Egypt. They were gods in image, but human in breath. Breathe slowly and picture a royal morning. The palace is wide and airy, its walls of white plaster gleaming in the soft light. decorated with painted scenes of lotus flowers and birds. Courtyards bloom with gardens of sycamores and palms. Pools fill with lotus blossoms where ducks swim lazily. Inside, the pharaoh awakens to the sound of servants moving softly, preparing fresh linen garments scented with oils. Musicians pluck harps in low tones, offering a calm rhythm to begin the day. He rises, stretches, and washes, the water cool against his skin, poured from jars by attendants. The morning feels both ordinary and extraordinary, a ritual of cleanliness and renewal. Now let's follow him as he dresses. He wears a simple white kilt at first, pleated and crisp, tied with care. Then come the ornaments, broad collars of gold and faience, bracelets on wrists, rings on fingers, sandals on his feet. The crown changes depending on the occasion. The red crown of Lower Egypt, the white crown of Upper Egypt, or the double crown combining both. Sometimes the blue war crown gleams on his head, though today it may be the Neem's headdress, striped and soft, falling across his shoulders. Each symbol is more than adornment. It is a language of kingship itself, proclaiming that he is not merely a man, but the bridge between gods and people. Stay with me, because here comes a tender truth. Pharaohs were seen as divine, yet their mornings began with meals much like ours. Bread, fruit, honey, milk, perhaps roasted fowl or fish. They sat with family, children sometimes climbing into their laps, wives offering a smile or a soft word. The hall may have been filled with attendants and scribes, but within the clatter of dishes and the scent of baked bread, there was still intimacy, still the hum of family. Isn't it soothing to imagine the most powerful figure in Egypt beginning the day with a bite of bread and a sip of sweet beer, just like any farmer along the Nile? Now, let us walk with him into the temple. The pharaoh's role was not only political, but spiritual. He was a high priest of every temple, the one who offered the gods on behalf of the people. Of course, priests performed the daily rituals, but the king's presence and ceremonies tied heaven and earth together. Imagine him stepping into Karnak or Luxor, the air heavy with incense, his steps slow and deliberate. The crowd gathered outside waiting to see him. He lifts a small statue of a god, offers a libation, speaks a prayer. His voice echoes in the stone halls, but his face is calm, serene, as though carrying the weight of divinity lightly. Breathe gently, because here is another quiet revelation. Much of a pharaoh's day was filled with listening. He met with scribes who read reports of harvests and floods, with generals who spoke of borderlands, with officials who brought disputes from villages. He nodded, questioned, gave judgments. His words could change lives. A tax lifted, a canal dug, a pardon granted. Yet the rhythm of governance was steady, not hurried, paced like the flow of the river. The pharaoh was a king, yes, but also a listener, a judge, a father of his people. Let us pause in his audience chamber. The walls are painted with scenes of offering, the floor cool beneath sandal feet. Courtiers stand in silence, waiting their turn to speak. A scribe kneels with a scroll, reading aloud a petition from a farmer who lost his land to a neighbor. The pharaoh listens, his gaze calm, his decision thoughtful. He gestures to the vizier, who records a judgment. The farmer will return home with justice, knowing the king's voice reached even a small corner of the world. Isn't it comforting to think of leadership not as loud decree, but as steady hearing? Now step with me into the palace gardens at midday. The heat of the sun is softened by shade trees, the air alive with the scent of flowers, the ripple of water in pools. The pharaoh walks here with his queen, perhaps Nefertari beside Ramses, or Tai with Amenhotep, or Ankhesenamun with Tutankhamun. Their children play nearby, chasing butterflies, splashing in shallow pools. Ducks quack. Cats stretch lazily on stone benches. Servants carry trays of figs and dates. For a moment, the weight of crown and scepter is lighter, replaced by laughter and warmth. The God King is simply a man among those he loves. Stay with me here, because here is a softer side of kingship. Pharaohs were not immune to sorrow. They buried children, lost battles, faced famine, disease, and doubt. In their tombs, inscriptions show prayers not only of power but of vulnerability. Grant me life, grant me health, grant me eternity. Behind the serene faces carved in stone lay human hearts that ached, hoped, and feared. Isn't it soothing and humbling? to remember that even those raised as gods knew the fragility of being human? Now, let us sit with a pharaoh in the evening. The court is quieter now, the business of the day complete. Musicians play softly, flutes, harps, drums, while dancers move gracefully, their anklets jingling faintly. Torches cast a warm glow over painted walls, the air heavy with the scent of lotus and myrrh. The pharaoh reclines on a low couch, sipping wine, watches children play, speaking quietly with his queen. Outside, the stars spread across the sky, the same stars painted on his future tomb ceiling. In this moment, he is not ruler of two lands, not Horus on earth, but father, a husband, a man cradled by night. Breathe slowly, because here comes the quiet heart of this chapter. Pharaohs were symbols, yes, but also people. Their crowns gleamed, their statues towered, but their lives were woven the same threads as any other. Bread, family, laughter, sorrow, sleep. Eternity needed their names, but humanity needed their presence. And so, softly, we close this chapter. The pharaoh's life, though elevated, was a rhythm of dawn and dusk, of offerings and meals, of judgments and joys. He was divine in role, but human in heart, carrying the burdens of a kingdom with steady grace. In the next chapter, we will walk into the world of queens and women of Egypt, whose presence shaped family, politics, and devotion in ways both seen and unseen. But for now, rest in the palace garden, the sound of flutes lingering in the air, the stars overhead steady and eternal. The river glows under moonlight as we drift closer to palaces and temples again, though this time our eyes turn not toward kings and priests, but toward the women who stood beside them. Queens, mothers, daughters, wives. Women of Egypt shaped the rhythm of family, ritual, and even rule itself. Stay with me, because the gentle twist of this chapter is this. While monuments carry the names of kings, the whispers of women echo through them too, woven quietly yet firmly into Egypt's eternity. Breathe slowly and picture a queen's morning. She wakes in a sunlit chamber, its walls painted with lotus blossoms, its windows opening onto a courtyard where palm trees sway in the breeze. Servants bring bowls of scented water, basket of fruit, and trays of cosmetics, green malachite for eyes, red ochre for lips, perfumed oils for skin. She sits calmly as attendants paint her eyes in the almond shape that became Egypt's eternal image of beauty. The ritual is not vanity but devotion. The cosmetics protect against sun and infection, the oils soothe the body, and the adornments honor the gods. To prepare the self is to prepare the soul. Now imagine her walking through the palace gardens. Ducks swim in lotus-filled pools. Children play among the reeds. Cats chase insects through the grass. She pauses to gather flowers. Their petals cool in the morning air, and offers them at a small household shrine. Queens were not only companions of kings. They were priestesses too, often associated with the goddess Hathor, the mother and nurturer. Their presence kept balance within the palace, ensuring that harmony, Ma'at, was upheld not only in temples but in homes. Stay with me, because here comes a name, Nefertari, the great queen of Ramses II. Her image stands carved beside her husband at Abu Simbel, nearly equal in size, a rare honor. Her tomb in the Valley of the Queens glows with some of the most vivid paintings in Egypt. Nefertari playing Senate with the gods, embraced by Hathor, guided by Anubis. The colors are rich, lapis blue, bright gold, deep red, her figure graceful, her face serene. To walk in her tomb is to feel her presence not as shadow but as radiance, as though she still smiles across the centuries. Isn't it soothing to think that love and devotion can be carved into stone, glowing long after both lives have passed? Let's pause in another story. Hatshepsut. She began as queen, wife of Thutmose II, but after his death, she rose beyond tradition, declaring herself pharaoh. She wore the false beard of kingship, took on the titles of Horus, and ruled for decades. Yet her reign was not one of conquest alone. It was marked by prosperity, trade, and monumental building. Her temple at Deir el-Bahari rises against the cliffs in perfect harmony, terraces stepping upward toward the sky, colonnades lined with her images. She is shown in statues sometimes as a woman, sometimes as a man, both gentle and strong. Stay with me here, because her story is a lullaby of resilience. When the world expected her to fade, she built instead. Breathe slowly, And consider the everyday women of Egypt, not only queens. Wives baked bread, spun flax, cared for children, and tended shrines. They sang lullabies under starry skies, told stories of gods by lamplight, and guided families through the rhythms of planting, harvesting, and festivals. Their names are rarely carved on walls, yet their presence was constant, as necessary as water and bread. Isn't it humbling to think that while kings ruled kingdoms, women ruled households, shaping life itself in unseen but eternal ways? Now step with me into a festival scene. Women weave garlands of lotus flowers, their laughter bright, their hands steady. Musicians play harps and sistrums. Dancers move gracefully, anklets jingling. Queens ride in golden chariots beside their kings, waving to the people. Children scatter petals. The streets glow with color and joy. For a moment, the line between palace and village blurs. Goddesses, queens, and mothers alike are honored, their strength celebrated openly. Stay with me, because here comes another name, Tai, the great queen of Amenhotep III. She was not only a consort, but an advisor, her wisdom respected by foreign rulers who wrote letters addressing her directly. She sat beside her husband in statues, her image carved with dignity and strength. In life, she counseled kings. In memory, she whispers of intelligence and presence, showing that queens could shape policy as much as beauty. Now, let's pause in a quiet chamber at night. A queen sits by lamplight, her children asleep nearby. She writes letters to her husband at war, or listens to reports brought by scribes. The air smells of oil and flowers. The only sound the soft crackle of the lamp. In this stillness, power feels less like command and more like care, as though to hold a family safe is to hold a kingdom steady. Isn't it soothing to think that tenderness, too, was a form of rule? Breathe gently, and imagine women at Deir el-Medina, the artisan's village. They baked bread, brewed beer, wove linen, and raised children while their husbands carved tombs. Yet they also had voices. Records survive of women writing petitions, appearing in court, owning property. Their lives were not silent. They moved with agency, even within a world shaped by men. Their laughter, worries, and prayers are faint but still present, like threads woven to the tapestry of Egypt's eternity. Stay with me here, because here is the soft heart of this chapter. Queens and women were memory keepers. They passed down stories, songs, and traditions. They taught children prayers, guided them in games, soothed them with lullabies beneath the stars. Their work may not have been carved in stone, but was carved in hearts, carried forward in generations. Without them, the pyramids would stand hollow, the temples silent. And so, softly, we close this chapter. From Nefertari's painted tomb to Hatshepsut's terraces, from Tai's wisdom to the laughter of mothers in village courtyards, women shaped Egypt's soul. Their presence lingers not in statues alone, but in whispers of care, resilience, and devotion. In the next chapter, we will sail with merchants and traders, whose boats carried Egypt's goods and stories far beyond the Nile. But for now, rest with the queens and mothers under a sky of stars, knowing their gentle strength endures in every whisper of eternity. The Nile is dark tonight, its surface holding the stars like scattered pearls. The air is still, save for the faint creak of ropes and the whisper of water against wood. This is where our story drifts now, onto the boats of Egypt's merchants and traders, men who left the calm of the riverbanks to sail into wider waters, carrying Egypt's grain, gold, and papyrus to distant lands. Stay with me, because the gentle twist of this chapter is this. Egypt's greatness was not only built on stone and prayer, but on sales and exchanges, quiet journeys that linked the Nile to the world. Breathe slowly and picture a merchant's dawn. The boat rests at the quay, ropes tied to wooden posts, the air smelling of fish, reeds, and pitch. Men load jars of wine, sacks of grain, bundles of linen, and rolls of papyrus. Others roll heavy ingots of copper, bags of natron, and baskets filled with faience beads. The deck is busy, yet calm, each movement practiced, each man knowing his place. The sail, folded neatly, waits to be raised once the wind strengthens. The captain checks the ropes, the oars, the rudder, his eyes scanning the horizon. Soon, they will push off into the current, the Nile carrying them northward toward the sea. Now imagine the river widening as they pass fields of barley and groves of sycamore. Farmers wave from the banks. Children splash in the water. Fishermen call across the waves. The sail rises, catching the morning breeze, and the boat glides more swiftly. The river is Egypt's artery, carrying not only goods but life itself. At every bend, temples rise, villages cluster, birds swoop low. The merchants breathe in the familiar scents, the sweetness of lotus, the sharp tang of fish drying in the sun, and yet their minds are already on distant shores. Stay with me, because here comes a tender truth. Trade was not just exchange of goods, but of stories. A merchant might bring back cedar wood from Lebanon, but also tales of mountains cloaked in forests. Unlike Egypt's flat deserts, he might bring incense from Punt, but also descriptions of monkeys, leopards, and exotic birds. Each journey widened Egypt's imagination, threading foreign wonders into the rhythm of home. Isn't it soothing to think of faraway lands arriving not as threats, but as gifts tucked into baskets and stories alike? Let's follow one boat to the Red Sea, through desert tracks where donkeys carry goods to waiting harbors. The air here smells different, salter, sharper, filled with winds from beyond. Ships sturdier than Nile boats wait with tall masts and wide hulls, ready to sail south toward Punt, a land of incense, ebony, and gold. Imagine the voyage, waves rocking gently, the horizon endless, the crew singing low songs keep rhythm. They carry jars of beer, bread, and dried fish, their provisions simple but sustaining. Nights at sea are filled with stars brighter than any torch. The sound of water against her like a lullaby. Now picture their arrival in Punt. The air is heavy with spice, the markets bustling with traders. Egyptians marvel at the sight of baboons, giraffes, and exotic birds, creatures strange yet wondrous. They trade beads, linen, and grain for ivory, myrrh, incense, and rare woods. Relationships are sealed not only with goods, but with feasts, songs, and handshakes. The merchants breathe deeply the fragrant air, pack their boats with treasures, and prepare to return. And when they do, Egypt's temples will glow with incense smoke, and its palaces will shine with carved ivory. Breathe gently, because here is another scene. In Byblos, far to the north, merchants unload rolls of papyrus and baskets of grain. In return, they receive cedar logs, long and straight, perfect for building ships and temples. The smell of cedar fills the air, rich, resinous, grounding. They also exchange bronze tools, silver ornaments, and jars of oil. The docks are alive with languages, gestures, laughter, and bargaining. Egypt's goods flow outward. Foreign goods flow inward. And between them lies not only wealth but friendship. Stay with me here, because here comes a quieter moment. On the return journey, as the boat drifts slowly along the Nile, the crew sits together at dusk, sharing food. They chew dates, sip beer, and tell stories of what they saw. Trees taller than pylons, mountains capped with snow, seas where fish leap like silver arrows. Some of the younger men listen wide-eyed, dreaming of journeys to come. The older men smile softly, their eyes distant, knowing the rhythm of home will call them back, no matter how far they roam. Now step with me into a market in Thebes. The merchants have returned, their goods displayed under awnings of woven reeds. Women finger beads of lapis lazuli, blue as the sky. Priests test the scent of incense, nodding with satisfaction. Children gape at carved ivory combs, polished and smooth. The market hums with voices, the air alive with fragrance and color. Coins and goods change hands, but so do stories. One man describes ships rocking the Red Sea. Another tells of forests where the sun barely reaches the ground. The market is not only trade but theater, a place where the world unfolds in baskets and jars. Breathe slowly and think of the Pharaoh himself, who relied on these merchants. His temples demanded incense, gold, and exotic animals. His builders needed cedar, bronze, and oil. His artisans sought lapis, turquoise, and silver. Without the merchants, the grandeur of Egypt would have dimmed. Yet they worked quietly, their names rarely inscribed, their journeys often unsung. Isn't it humbling to know that the glory of kings stood upon the sails of traders? Stay with me, because here is the general heart of this chapter. Trade was not only outward but inward. Egypt gave grain, papyrus, linen, and glass beads, spreading its abundance far beyond its borders. In return, it received not only treasures but recognition. Other lands saw Egypt as wealthy, fertile, and eternal. Through trade, Egypt's name carried across mountains, seas, and deserts, woven into the tapestry of the ancient world. Now, let us pause on the deck of a boat at night. The journey is long, but the crew rests easy. The stars are steady overhead, the sail flutters softly in the breeze, and the water laps gently against the hull. One man strums a harp, another hums a low tune. The air smells of salt and wood. The mood is calm, far from home, yet not lost, because every wave carries them back to the Nile, back to the heart of Egypt. And so, softly, we close this chapter. Merchants and traders may not have built pyramids or led armies, but their sails carried Egypt's spear across the world. They brought back treasures and tales, linking the Nile to lands beyond sight. In the next chapter, we will return to the villages of farmers and laborers, whose steady hands kept Egypt fed and its people strong. But for now, rest on the quiet deck of a merchant's boat, the stars above steady, the water below endless, the rhythm of the river carrying you gently toward sleep. The Nile breathes softly tonight, its waters dark and calm beneath the stars. As we drift along, let us turn our gaze to the people who live closest to its banks, the farmers and laborers whose hands shaped the soil, whose days rose and fell with the flood and ebb of the river. Stay with me, because the twist of this chapter is gentle but profound. While kings raised pyramids and priests lit incense, it was the farmers, with their plows and baskets, who kept Egypt alive. Without their steady rhythm, the temples would have been empty and the palaces hollow. Breathe slowly, and picture dawn in a small village. The first light glimmers on mud brick homes with flat roofs where families sometimes sleep on warm nights. Smoke rises from small hearths as women bake bread, the smell of barley and emmer wheat filling the air. Children chase chickens in courtyards, their laughter mingling with the braying of donkeys. In the fields nearby, men gather their tools, wooden plows tipped with bronze, sickles with sharp flint blades set in curves of wood, baskets woven of reeds. The day begins not with ceremony, but with movement, steady and sure. Now let us walk with them into the fields. The Nile has just receded, leaving rich black silt across the floodplain. The soil is soft, dark, and fertile, ready for seeds. A farmer guides his plow, pulled by oxen, the earth parting in neat lines. Another follows, scattering seeds of barley and wheat from a woven basket. Birds swoop low, stealing grains, but boy runs behind, clapping and shouting to scare them away. The rhythm of farming is simple, yet eternal. Plow, sow, water, harvest, each step tied to the breath of the river. Stay with me, because here comes a tender truth. Farmers worked in harmony with the Nile cycle. Ake, the flood, Paret, the growing season, Shimu, the harvest. When the floods rose, fields became lakes, and farmers turned to repairing tools, weaving, or working on state projects like temples and canals. When the waters fell, they rushed to sow before the ground dried. When crops grew tall, they watched the skies, prayed for gentle winds, and sang songs to keep time as they worked. Their lives were calendars written not in scrolls, but in soil and water. Isn't it soothing to imagine life paced so naturally, steady as a heartbeat? Now pause with me at midday. The sun blazes, and farmers rest beneath palm trees. They share bread, dates, and beer brewed thick and nourishing. Children bring water in clay jars, its coolness refreshing against dry lips. Conversations drift from weather to family, from tools that need mending to hopes for the harvest. The air hums with insects, the river glimmers nearby, and the sound of oxen lowing drifts across the fields. For a moment, the world is hushed, resting in the embrace of the river. Breathe gently, because here comes another layer. Not all labor was in the fields. Many men were conscripted for building projects during the flood season when farming paused. They hauled limestone blocks for pyramids, dug canals, raised obelisks, carved statues. It was hard work, but not endless toil. Families were fed with rations of bread, beer, onions, and fish, and workers sang as they hauled, their voices steady against the strain. These monuments, often thought of as pharaohs alone, rose from the muscles and sweat of countless unnamed men, whose strength turned dreams into stone. Stay with me here, because here is a quiet comfort. Records survive of farmers writing petitions when tax collectors took too much grain, of overseers punished for cruelty, of families supporting one another in lean years. Their voices echo faintly through time, a man pleading for fairness, a woman bartering her linen for food, a child learning to sow seeds alongside his father. These voices remind us that Egypt's eternity was built not only of stone but of resilience, compassion, and daily care. Now let us pause at harvest. Fields of barley ripple golden under the wind. Sickles flash in the sunlight, and families work together to gather the grain. Sheaves are bundled, stacked, and carried on donkeys to threshing floors, where oxen trample the stalks to release kernels. Children chase after the animals, laughing, while women sweep grain into baskets. The air is filled with dust, laughter, and song, the village alive with joy. For this is not just labor but celebration. The river has given, and the people are nourished. Breathe slowly, and picture evening in the village. Families sit together outside their homes, bread and beer shared. Stories told under the stars. Some play flutes or drums. Others clap to keep rhythm as dancers move in the firelight. Children fall asleep in their mother's arms. Cats curl by the hearth, and the fields rest in silence, waiting for another season. The simplicity of this life holds a peace, a steadiness that no monument can outshine. Isn't it soothing to imagine drifting to sleep with the scent of bread, the sound of crickets, and the glow of stars overhead? Stay with me a little longer, because here's the soft heart of this chapter. Though kings carved their names in stone, it was farmers and laborers who carved life itself into the earth, season by season. They are mostly unnamed, their faces lost, but their work endures in every loaf of bread, every temple built, every stone block lifted. Their rhythm was Egypt's rhythm, their breath Egypt's breath. Without them, the grandeur of Pharaohs would have crumbled. And so, softly we close this chapter. Farmers and laborers remind us that eternity is not built only of crowns and gold, but of hands that sow, reap, and lift. Their lives were humble, yet their legacy is eternal, woven into every field and every stone. In the next chapter, we will step into the festivals and celebrations of Egypt, where music, dance, and ritual wove joy into the steady rhythm of life. But for now, rest in the quiet of a village courtyard, the scent of fresh bread in the air, the stars overhead shining gently, steady as the Nile's flow. The Nile lies quiet beneath the stars, its waters carrying a hush across the land. Yet Egypt was not always still. In between the slow rhythms of farming and solemn chant of temples came bursts of color, music, and celebration. Festivals that drew whole communities together, weaving joy into the fabric of eternity. Stay with me, because a gentle twist of this chapter is this. Festivals were not escapes from the sacred, but moments when joy itself became holy, when laughter, song, and dance were offerings to the gods as much as incense or bread. Breathe slowly, and imagine dawn on the day of a great festival. Villages stir earlier than usual, women weaving garlands of lotus flowers, men preparing boats, children buzzing with anticipation. In Thebes, temple courtyards are scrubbed clean, priests polish statues of the gods, and musicians tune their harps and flutes. The air hums with energy, the smell of bread baking, beer brewing, incense burning. Even the animals seem to sense it. The donkeys braying, birds calling louder, cats weaving excitedly between legs. Now, picture the festival of Opet in Thebes, one of the most magnificent. The statue of Ammonius is taken from Karnak, placed in a gilded bark shrine, and carried by priests through streets lined with crowds. Trumpets sound, drums beat slowly, sistrums shake with bright rhythm. The people cheer, clap, and sing as the procession moves toward Luxor temple, linking two sacred spaces in a journey of renewal. The pharaoh walks too, offering prayers, showing his bond with the gods and his people. Imagine being in that crowd, feeling the ground tremble with footsteps, the air alive with music. Isn't it soothing to know that joy itself could be a form of devotion? Stay with me, because here comes another festival, the beautiful festival of the valley. At dusk, boats line up along the Nile, their sails glowing with lamplight. The statue of Ammonius crosses the river from east to west, visiting the tombs of ancestors. Families wait at the necropolis, offering food, flowers, and prayers to their departed loved ones. The air smells of roasted meat, honey cakes, and incense, the river reflecting flames like a trail of stars. Children laugh. Elders tell stories. Music drifts across the water. For one night, the living and the dead share in a feast. The boundary between them softened. Isn't it comforting to think of ancestors remembered not with silence, but with song and feasting? Now let us pause in a smaller village festival. The harvest is gathered, the grain stored safely, and people gather in the square. Musicians play flutes, drums, and harps. Dancers whirl with ribbons and anklets jingling. Beer flows from clay jars. Bread is shared freely, and voices rise in song. Neighbors exchange gifts of fruit and linen. Children chase each other with garlands of flowers. There are games, contests, playful wrestling, and races along the riverbank. The mood is not solemn but joyful, laughter filling the night as much as the stars. Breathe gently, because here comes a tender detail. Festivals were times when music and dance bloomed openly. The sistrum, a rattle sacred to Hathor, jingled in women's hands, believed to calm and please the gods. Harps were plucked with slow, gentle melodies. Flutes breathed airy notes, and drums kept steady rhythms. Dancers moved gracefully, their bodies painted, their steps weaving stories. Some danced to honor Hathor, goddess of music and joy. Others to honor Badet, the cat goddess of play and warmth. Every note and step was not only for amusement, but for balance, for Ma'at. Stay with me here, because festivals also brought release. They allowed the people to laugh, to eat their fill, to celebrate fertility, harvest, and love. In some, even wine flowed freely, and the joy became unrestrained. The festival of drunkenness, dedicated to Sekhmet, goddess of fierce power, was celebrated by drinking until laughter overcame fear, until chaos was turned into calm again. People slept under trees, singing until their voices faded, believing it honored Sekhmet by transforming her rage into peace. Isn't it soothing to think that joy and laughter could tame even the fiercest goddess? Now imagine the decorations. Flowers strung across doorways, garlands on boats, painted banners fluttering in the breeze, temples adorned with fresh offerings, shrines glowing with oil lamps, streets swept clean, mats spread for feasting. The colors are soft yet lively, lotus blue, papyrus green, ochre gold. In the air, the mingling of scents, flowers, food, incense, and the faint sweetness of wine. The whole land seems wrapped in a festival cloak, shimmering in the sunlight and glowing in the firelight. Breathe slowly, and let us pause in a quiet corner of the festival. A family gathers at a small shrine, offering bread and beer to the statue of Hathor. A mother whispers a prayer for her child's health. A father thanks the gods for a good harvest. Children place flowers carefully on the altar. Around them, the laughter of the crowd continues. But here there's intimacy, devotion woven softly into joy. Isn't it calming to know that in the midst of music and laughter, there was always space for tenderness? Stay with me, because here is the soft heart of this chapter. Festivals reminded the people that joy was sacred. To feast, to laugh, to dance, to sing. These were not distractions from eternity, but part of it. They were offerings of the heart, just as valuable as incense or stone. They connected villages to temples, families to ancestors, the living to the divine. Now let us step into evening. The festival is fading, but not gone. Fires burn low. Children sleep in their mother's arms, and musicians play softer, slower notes. The Nile reflects the last lanterns floating on its surface, each flame drifting gently with the current. The air is cooler now, the stars brighter, and a hush settles over the land. Tomorrow, the fields will call again, the temples will echo with chants, but tonight belongs to joy. And so, softly we close this chapter. Festivals in Egypt were reminders that eternity was not only solemn but joyful, that life itself was worth celebrating in laughter, music, and dance. In the next chapter, we will step into the mysteries of Egyptian medicine and healing, where herbs, spells, and prayers met in the care of body and spirit. But for now, rest in the glow of festival fires, the rhythm of distant drums fading into the night, the stars above steady, gentle, eternal. The Nile tonight is still, reflecting the stars like small lamps laid upon its waters. Our journey turns now to a quieter corner of Egypt, away from the grandeur of temples and the bustle of festivals, into the soft glow of healing spaces. Here, Physicians and priests, midwives and herbalists tended to the sick and weary, blending knowledge of plants and anatomy with prayers and spells. Stay with me, because a gentle twist of this chapter is this. Healing in Egypt was never divided between science and spirit. Both flowed together like the twin currents of the Nile, nourishing one another. Breathe slowly, and picture a small chamber lit by oil lamps. The air smells faintly of honey and herbs, coriander, fennel, garlic, and frankincense. A physician kneels beside a patient, examining a wound. His tools are simple yet effective. Bronze knives, needles, forceps, and linen bandages. He washes the wound with wine, applies honey to prevent infection, and binds it carefully. Honey, sweet and golden, is more than food. It is medicine, its natural properties known even then to soothe and heal. The patient sighs, comforted not only by the treatment, but by the care in the healer's hands. Now let us step into the library of a temple, where medical texts rest alongside hymns and rituals. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, filled with surgical observations, describes how to treat wounds of the head, chest, and spine. The Ebers Papyrus lists remedies for stomach pains, fevers, coughs, and even depression. One recipe calls for garlic and onions, another for castor oil, another for figs. These were not guesses, but accumulated knowledge, passed carefully from hand to hand, refined over generations. Isn't it soothing to think of wisdom preserved not only in stone, but in the pages of papyrus, written to ease suffering? Stay with me, because healing was never only about the body. A physician might whisper a prayer as he worked, calling upon Sekhmet, goddess of fierce strength, or Thoth, god of wisdom, to aid his efforts. He might recite an incantation to drive away illness believed to be caused by spirits or imbalance. The patient listened, eyes closed, reassured by the sound of sacred words. For the Egyptians, health was harmony between body, spirit, and cosmos. A remedy without a prayer was incomplete, just as a prayer without a remedy was unfinished. Now let us step into a home where a midwife tends to a woman in labor. The room is filled with women's voices, soft and steady. They massage her shoulders with scented oils, place amulets of Hathor and Tarit, the hippo goddess of childbirth, nearby for protection. Herbs are brewed in clay cups, steam rising in the warm air. The midwife guides a birth with calm authority, her hands sure, her voice reassuring. Soon, the cry of a newborn fills the space, and laughter follows. Bread and beer are shared, prayers offered, and the family rests in relief. Healing here is woven of touch, tradition, and trust. Breathe slowly, and think of the herbs themselves. Coriander for digestion, willow bark for pain, aloe for burns, castor oil for laxatives, cumin for calming the stomach. These plants grew along the Nile, their properties observed and remembered. Farmers tended them, healers gathered them, and priests sanctified them. In gardens near temples, medicinal plants were cultivated with care, each leaf and root part of Egypt's pharmacy. Isn't it calming to imagine a garden of healing, fragrant with mint, garlic, and lotus, growing quietly under the sun? Stay with me here, because surgery too was practiced. Simple fractures were set with splints, dislocations treated with careful manipulation, wounds stitched with linen thread. In some cases, trepanation, cutting into the skull, was attempted, though rarely. These were not reckless experiments, but thoughtful efforts, guided by observation. Mummies show evidence of healed bones, proving that patients survived their treatments. Behind the solemn statues and silent tombs lived the people who mended one another with steady hands. Now, let us pause in a more spiritual healing. A sick man lies in bed, his family gathered. A priest enters, carrying incense and amulets. He places a figurine of Sekhmet beside the bed, lights incense, and chants words of protection. He sprinkles water, thought to carry the blessings of the Nile, across the patient's forehead. The room fills with fragrant smoke, soft voices, and the sense of a greater presence. Whether the illness was cured or not, the patient felt comfort, his heart lightened by the ritual. Isn't it soothing to know that healing was as much about the spirit as the flesh? Breathe gently, because healing was also communal. Neighbors brought food, families offered prayers, women sang lullabies to comfort the sick. Illness was not faced alone, but within the arms of community. In this way, Egypt's medicine was not only in herbs and spells, but in love, shared quietly in times of weakness. Stay with me, because here's the heart of this chapter. Healing was an act of balance, just as farming balanced flood and drought, or temples balanced gods and men. It was not only about removing pain, but about restoring harmony, within the body, within the soul, within the family. Egypt's physicians were not only healers of wounds, but of fears, voices of reassurance in fragile hours. Now imagine evening in a healer's home. The day's work is done, tools cleaned and set aside, herbs hung to dry by the hearth. The healer sits quietly, sipping beer, listening to the river's faint whisper outside. Children play in the courtyard. A cat curls by the fire, and the stars shine steadily above. Tomorrow will bring new patients, new remedies, new prayers. But tonight there is rest and the comfort of knowing that each effort, each bandage tied, each prayer spoken, was part of Egypt's great web of care. And so, softly we close this chapter. Egypt's medicine blended wisdom and spirit, plants and prayers, hands and hearts. It reminds us that healing is not only a matter of science, but of kindness, patience, and presence. In the next chapter, we will step into the mysteries of Egyptian writing and wisdom again, where scribes preserved not only laws and stories, but knowledge meant to guide the living and the dead. But for now, rest in the quiet of a healer's chamber, the smell of herbs lingering in the air, the glow of oil lamps steady as the stars above. The Nile drifts gently under the moon, its waters whispering like parchment being unrolled. Tonight we leave the healing chambers behind and step again into the world of words, into Egypt's wisdom and writing, where scribes bent over papyrus by lamplight, capturing not only records of grain and taxes, but truths meant to outlast lifetimes. Stay with me, because the twist of this chapter is quiet but profound. In a land of stone pyramids, it was ink and papyrus, fragile and light, that carried Egypt's mind across the centuries. Breathe slowly, and picture a scribe at dawn. He sits cross-legged, palette in hand, two wells for red and black ink carved into its wood. A slender reed pen rests between his fingers, frayed at the tip. On the ground before him lies a roll of papyrus, smooth and pale, waiting for words. He dips the pen in ink, pauses, and begins. The script flows like water, hieroglyphs of birds, eyes, and rivers, hieratic signs swift and compact. The room is quiet, but for the soft rasp of reed against fiber, the faint smell of ink mixed from soot and ochre. Each stroke is a bridge between thought and eternity. Now, let us step into the house of life, the temple library where knowledge gathered. Shelves hold rolls of papyrus tied with cords, each labeled with care. One contains hymns to the gods, another medical texts, another instructions for rituals. There are tales of kings, treatises on astronomy, calculations of geometry, lists of offerings, and stories of journeys to the afterlife. The air smells of dust, ink and papyrus, a perfume of memory itself. Priests and scribes move softly, unrolling scrolls, reciting passages, teaching apprentices. Isn't it soothing to imagine wisdom resting quietly in such places, waiting to be read by lamplight? Stay with me, because here comes a tender detail. Writing was power. A farmer could plow a field, a builder could raise a wall, but a scribe could make their work eternal by setting it in words. In tombs, inscriptions spoke for the dead. May you give bread, beer, and cattle for my soul. In courts, contracts written by scribes settled disputes long after the words were spoken. In letters, scribes carried love, longing, and news across distances. To write was to weave permanence out of breath. Now, let us listen to a wisdom text, a sebate copied by generations of students. Do not be arrogant because of your knowledge. Speak with the ignorant as with the wise. A good word is hidden more deeply than emerald, yet it may be found among maidservants at the grindstone. These teachings, simple yet profound, guided how to live well, how to listen, how to respect. Isn't it calming to think of advice written thousands of years ago still echoing in the stillness tonight? Breathe gently and picture a student learning. He sits with a small board coated in plaster, copying lines over and over. Be a scribe, for scribe commands others. He is not commanded. His hand wavers, but his teacher encourages him. Errors are corrected, lines repeated. Slowly, his signs grow surer, his rhythm steadier. Outside, children play, but here in the schoolroom there is quiet discipline. The knowledge that each stroke of the pen is a step toward honor. Scribes were respected not for wealth or strength, but for their wisdom and memory. Stay with me, because stories too live in these scrolls. Tales like the story of Sinew, of a courtier fleeing into exile, longing for home, finally welcomed back in old age. Or the tale of the shipwrecked sailor, who finds himself on an island where a giant serpent speaks kindly to him. These are not dry records, but living voices, filled with longing, wonder, and hope. Imagine hearing them read aloud at night, a scribe's voice steady in the lamplight, the words carrying listeners far beyond their walls. Now, let us pause in the tomb chamber. On the walls are spells from the pyramid texts, later the coffin text, and finally the Book of the Dead. Each spell is written carefully, prayers and instructions to guide the soul through the afterlife. May your heart be light in the weighing. May the gates of the west open before you. May Ra's boat carry you safely. The hieroglyphs are carved deeply, filled with paint, glowing in the torchlight. Words were not only knowledge, they were magic, power that shaped reality. Isn't it soothing to know that words themselves were seen as living companions, guiding souls through eternity? Breathe slowly, because scribes also preserved the practical. They recorded harvest yields, lists of workers, inventories of temples, ostraca, small shard of pottery, bare quick notes, sketches, practice signs. One shows a scribe's hand drawing a cat chasing a mouse, playful, ordinary, reminding us that even in sacred tasks there was room for humor. Another records a complaint, another a simple receipt. Through such fragments, we hear their voices as if across a table, human, familiar. Stay with me, because here's the heart of this chapter. Egypt's wisdom was not carved only in stone, but written in fragile fibers of papyrus. Much of it was lost, burned, crumbled, washed away, but enough survives to remind us of a civilization that believed memory mattered. They wrote not only for kings, but for families, neighbors, apprentices, and themselves. In every line, a voice whispers, "Do not let me be forgotten." Now imagine evening in the house of life. The lamps burn low. Scribes roll up scrolls. Apprentices clean their palettes. Outside, the night hums with crickets. The river gleams faintly, and the stars stretch endlessly above. Within the temple walls, silence settles like a blanket, the scrolls resting in their shells, patient and eternal. Tomorrow, they will be read again, copied again, their words flowing once more like the river. But tonight they sleep, just as we do, in the quiet embrace of eternity. And so, softly we close this chapter. Egypt's wisdom endures not only in statues and pyramids, but in words. Ink strokes on papyrus that carried memory across time. In the next chapter, we will walk to the tombs themselves again, not as builders or readers, but as dreamers, seeing how art and writing join to guide the dead. But for now, rest in the hush of the scribe's chamber, the soft scratch of a reed pen fading into silence, the stars above glowing like hieroglyphs in the sky. The desert is hushed tonight, the sand cooling under a canopy of stars. As the wind drifts over the dunes, it carries us toward places hidden beneath the earth, Egyptian tombs, carved deep into stone or raised in bright mastabas, built not as places of sorrow, but as eternal homes for the dead. Stay with me, because here's a gentle twist. These tombs were not silent vaults, but lively spaces filled with color, music, feasts, and prayers, painted and carved so that the departed could live forever in beauty. Breathe slowly, and imagine stepping into a noble's tomb at Saqqara. The entrance is plain, a simple doorway of stone, but inside the walls bloom with vivid images. Farmers plow fields, fishermen cast nets, dancers sway in rhythmic grace. Servants bring trays of bread, beer, and fruit. Geese march in careful rows, lotus blossoms open in painted pools. Musicians play harps and flutes. This is not mourning. It is life itself, preserved in pigments. The soul, the Ka, was thought to draw strength from these images, to eat the painted bread, to drink the carved beer, to walk again through painted gardens. Now let us walk deeper into the tomb of Ti, a nobleman. His walls are alive with detail. Cattle crossing a river, boats sailing with sails full of wind. Ti himself standing tall, larger than life, his figure commanding the scene. His wife stands beside him, his children at his feet. Servants hunt birds with nets, craftsmen carve wood, dancers turn in joy. The scenes are not random. They are carefully chosen, each one a prayer that these delights will never fade. Isn't it soothing to think of eternity painted in such gentle colors? A promise that nothing beloved would be lost? Stay with me, because the tombs of pharaohs carried another layer. Deep in the Valley of the Kings, long corridors twist into the earth, their ceilings painted with stars, their walls inscribed with sacred texts. Here are the Amduat and the Book of Gates, maps of the sun god Ra's journey through the underworld. Hour by hour, the texts guide the king's soul past serpents, lakes of fire, and gates guarded by deities. Yet the tone is not fearful, but steady, promising that with the right spells and offerings, the king will rise with the sun once more. Now, picture the tomb of Seti. Its chambers glow with exquisite color, blues and gold still vivid after millennia. The ceiling is a night sky, stars painted in endless patterns. Goddesses stretch their bodies across the vault, embracing the king in their arms. Each figure is graceful, each sign precise. Walking through it feels like moving through a dream, a painted universe designed to carry the soul gently into dawn. Breathe gently, because here comes another truth. Tombs were also filled with objects. Food, furniture, clothing, jewelry. Even games were placed beside the body. A man might be buried with his favorite staff, a woman with her cosmetics, a child with toys. Miniature models of servants, bakers, and brewers were placed to work eternally in the afterlife. These were not luxuries but necessities, ensuring comfort and continuity. The afterlife was not imagined as strange and distant, but as Egypt itself, perfected and eternal. Stay with me, because here is a tender detail. In the tomb of Mekheter, small wooden models were found. Scenes of women weaving, men brewing beer, boats sailing with tiny sailors at the oars. Each figure delicately carved, each task eternal. To the Egyptians, even the simplest acts, baking bread, rowing a boat, were sacred enough to preserve forever. Isn't it calming to imagine a miniature world, timeless and quiet, created so that life's comforts would never fade? Now let us pause at the threshold of Tutankhamun's tomb. Though small compared to others, it overflowed with treasures, golden shrines, chariots, thrones, beds, statues, and the boy king's mask, its gold facerine beneath blue stripes. Yet beyond the splendor lies the same purpose, to provide a home for the Ka, to carry the pharaoh safely into eternity. The mask itself was more than beauty. It was a protective spell, a face of divinity placed over the human, ensuring his spirit's safe passage. Breathe slowly, because tombs also carried words of power. On walls, coffins, and papyri, spells were written, "I have not lied, I have not stolen, I have not killed." These were the declarations of innocence, to be spoken before Osiris in the Hall of Judgment. The heart would be weighed against the feather of Maat. If light, the soul would join the blessed. If heavy, it would be lost. Yet the tomb gave the soul every chance. Prayers, spells, amulets, and a love of family carved in stone. Stay with me, because here is the soft heart of this chapter. Tombs were not houses of death, but of life remembered and continued. Every painted goose, every carved boat, every line of text was an act of love, a promise that the person mattered, that they would not be forgotten. The stone may have sealed them from the world above, but within, life blossomed eternal, safe, and serene. Now imagine evening in a worker's village, near the Valley of the Kings. The builders have returned from carving and painting, their hands stained with pigment, their bodies weary. They sit together, eating bread and onions, sipping beer, talking quietly. They know the tombs they craft are not theirs, but they take pride in their work. Each figure they paint, each spell they inscribe, is a gift of eternity. They laugh, sing, and rest, the stars above watching. Tomorrow they will return to the tombs, their brushes ready, their chisels sharp, their hands steady. And so, softly we close this chapter. Tombs in Egypt were eternal homes, not dark prisons. They carried laughter, song, harvest, and prayers into forever, painted with love and built with care. In the next chapter, we will step into Egyptian art and symbolism more fully, exploring how every color, every image, Every sign carried meaning beyond what the eye could see. But for now, rest in the cool stillness of a painted chamber, its walls alive with gentle figures, its ceiling a sky of stars, its silence a promise of peace. The night is quiet, the Nile flowing as gently as ink across a page. Tonight, we enter a realm of beauty and mystery, Egyptian art and symbolism. Unlike modern art, which often seeks to capture fleeting emotions or perspectives, Egyptian art was steady, eternal, and precise. Every stroke carried purpose. Every color sang with meaning. Every symbol whispered to gods and people alike. Stay with me, because the twist of this chapter is subtle but powerful. Egyptian art was not only to be looked at, but to be lived with, to be trusted as a companion in both this life and the next. Breathe slowly, and imagine standing before a painted wall in a tomb. At first, the figures may look stiff, their bodies shown in profile, their eyes and shoulders turned forward. Yet this was not clumsiness, it was intention. To show a person the way most complete, the Egyptians combined perspectives. Profile for the head and legs, frontal for the shoulders and eyes. It was not about realism, but wholeness. They painted not as the eye sees, but as the soul remembers. Isn't it soothing to know that art was not a mirror but a key, unlocking the fullness of a person's being? Now let us step closer to the colors themselves. Red, the color of power, energy, and sometimes danger, used for skin for the desert, for the fierce heat of the sun. Blue, the shade of the sky and the Nile, a sign of fertility, renewal, and eternity. Green, the color of papyrus and fresh growth, used for Osiris, Lord of rebirth, and for the promise of life after death. Gold, shining like the sun, reserved for gods, for the eternal, for what could not decay. Black, the rich hue of the Nile's fertile silt, symbolizing rebirth, not despair. White, purity and sacredness, the color of priests' robes. Each color was chosen with care, so that the walls themselves spoke without words. Stay with me, because symbols filled every corner. The Ankh, shaped like a looped cross, stood for life itself, eternal and divine. The Djed pillar, tall and steady, was the backbone of Osiris, symbol of strength and stability. The scarab beetle, rolling its ball of dung across the ground, became a sign of the sun's daily rebirth, of persistence, of transformation. The lotus flower, opening with the sun and closing at night, symbolized creation, new beginnings and eternal cycles. Each was simple in shape, yet infinite in meaning. Now let us pause at a temple wall. Scenes of the Pharaohs smiting enemies may look violent, yet they are not literal battles, but symbols of order triumphing over chaos. The enemies are not individuals, but embodiments of disorder, pushed down beneath the power of Ma'at. When priests and people saw these carvings, they did not see cruelty. They saw assurance, a reminder that balance held firm, that the universe was safe. Isn't it common to think of images serving not to frighten, but to reassure? Breathe gently and imagine the artisans at work. In Deir el-Medina, the village of tomb builders, painters, and sculptors rose early, sharpening their chisels, mixing pigments from ground minerals, red from ochre, blue from lapis or copper, green from malachite, black from soot, white from gypsum. They ground the powders with water, mixing them into paints, then applied them to smooth plaster walls. The lines were drawn carefully, grids guiding proportions, every hand steady. Their work was not only craft but devotion, each figure painted as a prayer, each color as a hymn. Stay with me, because here comes another layer. Egyptian art was alive with movement, even in its stillness. A row of dancers shown in sequence conveyed rhythm and joy. Hunters with bows, fishermen with nets, farmers plowing. Each scene carried the pulse of daily life. Yet the figures remained timeless, unwrinkled, ageless, serene. In this way, art captured both the moment and eternity, the fleeting and the everlasting. Now let us step into the sculptor's workshop. A block of limestone stands before him, rough and pale. With copper chisels and stone hammers, he chips carefully, revealing a face, a body, a posture. The figure emerges slowly, symmetrical, calm, idealized. Statues were not portraits as we know them. They were vessels for the Ka, the life force. A statue of a king or noble was not just likeness, but presence, a place where their soul could dwell. Eyes were inlaid with rock crystal to gleam with life. Lips curve into soft serenity. Isn't it soothing to imagine stone transformed into presence, silent yet alive? Breathe slowly and think of small objects too. Amulets carved in the shapes of ankhs, scarabs, or eyes of Horus, worn for protection. Jewelry of gold, lapis, and turquoise, not only decoration but talisman. Chairs carved with lion's paws, boxes painted with hunting scenes, cosmetic jars shaped like lotus buds. Even the smallest household item carried beauty and meaning, blending the sacred with the ordinary. Life itself was art, imbued with symbols that made the invisible visible. Stay with me, because here's the tender truth. Art was not only for kings, but for everyone. A humble pot might be painted with fish, a child's toy shaped like a hippo, a weaving decorated with lotus flowers. In each, the same spirit of meaning dwelled. The people lived surrounded by symbols, their world gently reminding them of order, rebirth, and eternity. Now, let us pause in the tomb chamber again. The ceiling painted with stars, the walls with harvests, feasts, and prayers, the colors still glowing after thousands of years. The art was not decoration, but function. It fed the soul, guided it, comforted it. For the Egyptians, art was not about beauty alone, but about survival. Without the images, the soul might go hungry, the journey might falter. Every goose, every loaf of bread painted was nourishment, real in its sacred purpose. Breathe gently, because here's the heart of this chapter. Egyptian art reminds us that beauty is never empty. It carries meaning, care, and love. It was a way to anchor eternity in stone and paint, to reassure the living and guide the dead. Its symmetry, its colors, its quiet figures all whisper the same message. Balance, life, rebirth, peace. Now imagine evening in Deir el-Medina. The artisans have set down their tools, their brushes rinsed, their hands tired but content. They sit in small courtyards, eating bread and stew, sipping beer. Children play at their feet. The days were glows in the valley nearby, hidden in tombs, waiting to be discovered by eyes millennia later. For the artisans, it was simply their craft, their devotion, their life's rhythm. For us, it is a bridge across time, a gentle reminder that art, when filled with meaning, never fades. And so, softly we close this chapter. Egyptian art and symbolism carried eternity in every line and color, reminding us that beauty itself can be a form of prayer. In the next chapter, we will step into Egypt's temples again, but this time to feel their spaces, as living worlds of ritual, sound, and silence. For now, rest in the painted chamber, the walls alive with symbols, the stars above steady, eternal. The night sky hangs over the Nile like a vast canopy, stars scattered like grains across black silk. Tonight, we drift not toward tombs or homes, but into Egypt's temples, those great stone sanctuaries that stood not as ruins, but as living worlds of ritual, music, and breath. Stay with me, because the gentle twist here is this. Temples were not silent halls of stone, but vibrant, beating hearts of the cosmos. Within their walls, priests sang, incense curled, and the gods were believed to walk among men. Breathe slowly, and imagine approaching Karnak at dawn. The first light strikes colossal pylons, their massive gateways painted once in bright colors, now glowing softly in the rising sun. Beyond lies a forest of columns, taller than palms, carved with hieroglyphs and crowned with capitals shaped like lotus buds. Birds nest in the heights, their calls echoing through the stillness. The air smells of sand, stone, and faint incense, lingering from the night's offerings. As you walk forward, you feel the hush deepen, as though each step draws you closer to a living presence. Now, let us pause at Luxor Temple in the evening. Torches flicker along the processional way, lined with sphinxes, their calm faces watching as priests lead statues of the gods in golden shrines. Trumpets sound, drums beat steadily, sistrums rattle with shimmering rhythm. The people gather along the avenue, their voices low in prayer, their hands raised in devotion. The Pharaoh walks too, dressed in linen and gold, his face serene, his movements slow and deliberate. This is not only spectacle, it is renewal, a binding of heaven and earth through ritual. Isn't it soothing to picture such harmony, the divine and human walking side by side? Stay with me, because here comes another temple, smaller but equally alive. the temple of Hathor at Dendera. Its ceilings are painted deep blue, stars scattered across it, constellations winding in careful patterns. Priests sing hymns to Hathor, goddess of music, love, and joy. Women shake sistrums, their sound like rainfall of silver, meant to soothe and delight the goddess. The air is sweet with incense, warm with candlelight. Within this space, laughter and song are not distractions, but prayers, offered as gifts as real as bread or beer. Breathe gently, and imagine a priest's morning routine in a temple. Before sunrise, he bathes in sacred waters, shaves his head, dresses in pure white linen. He enters the sanctuary barefoot, carrying flowers, bread, and jars of beer. He approaches the inner shrine, where the god statue rests hidden in its naos. With gentle hands, he opens the doors, greets the god with bows and prayers, washes and anoints the statue, dresses it in fine linen, and presents food. The god eats not by mouth, but by essence, the offerings transformed into nourishment through ritual. When the service ends, the statue is veiled again, resting in darkness until tomorrow. Isn't it calming to know that each day began not with haste, but with reverence, rhythm, and devotion? Stay with me, because here's another layer. Temples were designed as journeys, from the bright outer courts where the public gathered, through hypostyle halls thick with columns, into ever smaller, darker rooms. The path led inward, closer and closer to the Holy of Holies. It was a movement from light to shadow, from noise to silence, from world to eternity. Even the architecture itself whispered meaning, guiding each step deeper into the mystery. Now let us pause at the temple of Abu Simbel, carved into cliffs by Ramses II. At dawn, sunlight pierces through the entryway twice a year, illuminating statues deep inside. The pharaoh himself, seated among gods. This alignment is no accident but careful design, binding the rhythms of the sun to the rhythms of stone. Outside, colossal statues stare serenely over the Nile, their faces calm, their bodies immense, as if mountains themselves had taken human form. Standing there, you feel both small and embraced, part of something vast yet tender. Breathe slowly, because temples were not only for gods but for people. They were centers of economy, storing grain, managing estates, employing workers, supporting artisans. Festivals spilled from their gates into the streets, music and laughter filling whole cities. Pilgrims traveled miles to pray, to leave offerings, to seek healing. The temple was cosmos and community, sacred and ordinary, stone and heartbeat. Stay with me, because here comes a quiet moment inside. In the cool shade of columns, a priest reads from a scroll of hymns. His voice is low, steady, resonant. The hieroglyphs he reads are not only words but spells, carrying sound as offering. Around him, the columns loom, each carved with prayers, each surface alive with figures of gods and kings. The air is thick with silence, but within it, the chant is like a river flowing softly through stone. Isn't it soothing to imagine sound filling such spaces, not loud or harsh, but steady and eternal? Now, picture evening outside the temple. The rituals have ended, the gates are closed, but families gather nearby. Children play in the dust, vendors sell bread and figs, storytellers weave tales of gods and heroes. The temple looms above, dark now, but still pulsing with presence to the people. It is not only a building, but a neighbor, a guardian watching silently as the stars brighten. Breathe gently, because here is the heart of this chapter. Temples were not cold stone. They were breathing worlds, living symbols of the universe, places where time itself seemed to pause. Every sound, every offering, every shaft of sunlight carried meaning, binding heaven to earth. Gods of people silence the song. They remind us that sacredness need not be hidden. It can bloom in architecture, ritual, and even the steady rhythm of daily prayers. Now imagine night deepening in Karnak. The columns cast long shadows in the moonlight, the air cool and fragrant with lingering incense. Owls call softly in the distance. Water laps faintly against the riverbank. Within the sanctuary, the statue of the god rests veiled, embraced by silence. Outside, the people sleep, comforted by the temple's presence, knowing it stands as protector and bridge between worlds. And so, softly, we close this chapter. Temples in Egypt were not only monuments, they were living hearts, binding together ritual, sound, and meaning. In the next chapter, we will step into Egypt's connections beyond its borders, exploring trade and travel across deserts and seas. But for now, rest beneath the shadow of columns, the stars above steady, the night calm, the temple breathing softly as you drift asleep. The Nile drifts beneath a velvet night, stars mirrored in its surface like countless oil lamps. Tonight, our journey carries us beyond temples and tombs, into the wide world of trade and travel. For Egypt was never an island of stone alone. It was a crossroads, its river a highway, its deserts pathways, its sea a horizon of promise. Stay with me, because here's a gentle twist. Egypt's greatness was not only in what it built, but in what it shared, the exchange of goods and ideas weaving it into the fabric of distant lands. Breathe slowly and imagine a bustling dock at Memphis. Boats line the river, their sails furled, their decks piled high with cargo. Men unload amphorae of wine from the Levant, jars of fragrant oil, cedar with planks long and straight. Others carry baskets of Egyptian grain to be loaded onto another vessel, bound for hungry cities across the Mediterranean. The air is thick with shouts, laughter, the creak of ropes, the smell of fish, tar, and spice. It is not solemn but alive, a market of water where worlds meet. Now, let us step onto one of those boats. Its hull is built of wooden planks lashed together, its sail tall and square. The crew rows with oars, their muscles steady, their voices chanting softly to keep time. The captain watches the current, the wind, the stars above. The cargo is precious, gold, papyrus, linen, grain. The destination may be Byblos, land of cedar trees, or Punt, the mysterious realm of incense and ivory. The journey is long, but the river and sea are guides, steady as ever. Isn't it soothing to imagine drifting by starlight, the sail filled, the water calm beneath? Stay with me, because here comes Punt, a land half legend, half reality, visited by Hatshepsut's expedition. Release at Deir el-Bahari show ships laden with goods, incense trees, gold, ebony, exotic animals. Men carry baskets of resin. Women of Punt with elaborate hair greet the Egyptians warmly. The scene is not one of conquest, but of exchange, curiosity, and welcome. For the Egyptians, Punt was a place of wonder, a mirror of paradise, a land where incense grew in groves and the gods seemed close at hand. Now let us pause at the desert roads. Caravans of donkeys carry copper from Sinai, turquoise from the mountains, alabaster from the desert quarries. Traders walk beside them, singing to keep rhythm, their feet steady in the sand. They rest in oases, cool water and palm shade waiting after long stretches of heat. At night, they sleep beneath the stars, the desert silent except for the sound of wind over dunes. Each journey is both hardship and promise, binding the Nile to lands far away. Breathe gently, because trade was more than goods. It was stories, languages, and ideas. From Nubia came not only gold and ivory, but music, rhythms, and warriors who served in Egyptian armies. From the Levant came not only cedar, but myths, weaving into Egyptian thought. From Crete and Cyprus came pottery, and designs that mingled with local art. Egypt absorbed and gave in return, its culture flowing outward even as it welcomed what arrived. Stay with me, because here is a tender detail. In Amarna letters, clay tablets exchanged between kings, Egyptian pharaohs wrote to rulers of Babylon, Assyria, and Hutti. They spoke of daughters sent in marriage, of gifts of lapis lazuli, horses and chariots, of alliances sealed not with swords but with words. The tone is formal yet human, a reminder that diplomacy was itself a kind of trade, a barter of trust and kinship. Isn't it calming to know that even kings, across deserts and seas, sought connection through gifts and letters? Now let us return to the Nile, Egypt's greatest road. Feluccas sail gracefully, their white sails leaning into the wind. Fishermen cast nets. Traders steer boats heavy with grain. Priests ferry statues of gods for festivals. The river is alive with movement, each boat carrying not only cargo but stories. The steady lap of water against what is like a heartbeat, a rhythm that carried Egypt's lifeblood north to the delta and outward to the sea. Breathe slowly and picture a marketplace in Thebes. Traders from far lands mingle with Egyptians, their clothes and accents different, but their purpose the same. Spices from the east perfume the air. Nubian gold glitters in the sun. Syrian glass vessels gleam with color. Children chase one another between stalls. Women barter for beads and fabrics. Men argue cheerfully over prices. The marketplace hums like a hive, its energy soft yet endless. Stay with me, because travel was not only for trade. Pilgrims journeyed to sacred sites, carrying offerings to Abydos or Luxor. Families visited tombs of ancestors during festivals, sailing across the river to leave food and flowers. Officials traveled for census and inspection, scribes recording harvests far from home. Soldiers marched to defend borders, their song steady, their steps firm. Each journey was part of the web of life, weaving Egypt together from Delta to Nubia. Now let us step into evening on the open sea. A ship drifts toward Crete, its sail glowing orange in the sunset. The crew sits on deck, eating bread and dried fish, laughing softly. The horizon stretches wide, the stars soon to appear. The sea is vast, but the sailors trust it, as farmers trust the Nile. Their cargo is precious, but their bond as crew is their comfort, each man part of the whole. Isn't it soothing to picture such calm, a ship rocking gently, stars rising, the sea breathing around it? Breathe gently, because here's the heart of this chapter. Egypt's greatness did not lie only in pyramids or temples, but in its openness, its willingness to send and receive, to share and to learn. Its people were not isolated, but part of a network of lands bound by trade, trust, and travel. Every cedar beam in a temple roof, every jar of incense burned in a shrine, every bead of lapis in a necklace spoke of journeys, connections, friendships carried across miles. Now imagine night falling on a dockside village. The boats are moored, the sails tied, the cargo stacked safely. Families sit together, eating figs and bread, children listening to sailors' tales of far-off lands. Cats prowl among baskets of fish, dogs curl in the sand. The river glimmers with moonlight, the air is cool, and the voices fade into laughter. Tomorrow, boats will set out again, caravans will leave the gates, letters will travel across deserts. But tonight, there is rest, the hush of the Nile steady and eternal. And so, softly we close this chapter. Egypt's story was not only carved in stone, but carried on water, sand, and wind in the journeys of traders, travelers, and dreamers. In the next chapter, we will come to the quiet end of our story, where Egypt's eternity becomes a lullaby, a gentle outro to our long voyage together. But for now, rest by the river, sails furled, stars above steady, your breath calm as the Nile itself. The night is deep, the Nile resting under stars that shimmer like fragments of eternity. We have walked through pyramids and temples, lingered in markets and festivals, sailed across seas, and stood in tombs painted with colors that never fade. Now, at the end of this journey, we rest in Egypt's quiet, not as visitors rushing through its grandeur, but as friends who have listened to its heartbeat. Stay with me, because here's a soft twist of this closing chapter. Egypt's eternity is not only in its monuments, but in the calm it leaves in us, the reassurance that even across thousands of years, beauty, balance, and memory endure. Breathe slowly, and let your thoughts drift back to the beginning. Remember the first time we pictured the Nile's waters at dawn, silver against the banks, carrying boats filled with bread and barley. Recall the farmer sowing seeds in dark soil, children chasing birds from the fields, families gathering in courtyards at night. These moments, so simple, were the true foundation of Egypt, the everyday life that nourished kings and built pyramids. Their rhythm was slow, steady, safe. Doesn't it soothe you to know that the same river still flows, patient and eternal? Now, let us recall the pyramids themselves. At first, we saw them half-built, alive with the effort of workers, songs rising with each block hauled into place. Later, we saw them finished, their white limestone gleaming, their capstones catching sunlight. We stood among the workers at night, hearing laughter by firelight, smelling bread and onions, watching the pyramid loom against the stars. We realized then that these monuments were not silent tombs, but communities in stone, built by countless hands, each one part of the whole. Stay with me, because temples followed, vast and resonant. Karnak's columns rose like trees in a forest of stone. Dendra's ceilings shimmered with painted stars. Abu Simbel glowed in the dawn. Priests sang hymns, incense curled upward. Statues were dressed each morning with linen and flowers. These were not cold spaces, but living worlds, binding earth and sky, gods and people. When you picture them now, let their vastness calm you. Their symmetry slow your breath. Their silence carry you into rest. Breathe gently, and remember the festivals. Crowds filling the streets, music and dance rising like joy itself turned sacred. Boats lit with lanterns drifting across the Nile. Families leaving offerings for ancestors. Laughter and prayer mingling as one. These were the days when Egypt glowed brightest, when joy was as holy as devotion. Hold that memory softly now, as if you too were sitting by the river, watching lanterns float like stars upon the current. Now let us recall the healers, the midwives, the physicians who mixed herbs and honey, who whispered prayers to Sekhmet and Thoth, who comforted the weary with gentle touch. Healing in Egypt was never only science, never only faith, but both plants and spells, hands and hearts woven together. Let this remind you now, as you rest, that balance is healing, that peace comes from harmony within and without. Stay with me, because we must not forget the scribes, their reed pens scratching softly on papyrus. They copied hymns, letters, contracts, and tales. They preserved wisdom in fragile fibers, reminding us that words, though light, can outlast stone. Their advice still whispers tonight. Do not be arrogant because of your knowledge. Speak with the ignorant as with the wise. Let their calm, steady voices linger in your mind as gentle reassurance. Now, picture the tombs again, not as dark places, but as painted homes for eternity. Geese marching, dancers swaying, fields rippling with barley, families feasting forever, ceilings painted with stars, walls inscribed with prayers. May you pass safely, may your heart be light. Within those chambers, the Ka was never alone, for art itself became companion and guide. Isn't it soothing to imagine eternity not as emptiness, but as beauty renewed without end? Breathe slowly, because Egypt's story also flowed outward. Boats sailed to Punt and Byblos. Caravans crossed deserts. Letters traveled to Babylon and Crete. Gold, incense, cedar, and stories passed between lands. Egypt was never closed, but always connected, its greatness woven into a wider world. Let this remind you that all journeys, even yours tonight, are part of something larger, threads in a web that stretches far and wide. Stay with me now, for here's the heart of this final chapter. Egypt's eternity is not only its own, but something it offers us: peace and rhythm, comfort and continuity, reassurance and beauty. Its pyramids stand as mountains of stone, but its real gift is gentler. The sense that life, with its work and laughter, its prayers and songs, is worth preserving, worth remembering, worth cherishing forever. Now let us rest on the riverbank one last time. The air is cool, the stars bright. Families sleep in their homes. Fires glow faintly. Cats curl in courtyards. Donkeys breathe softly in the dark. Across the desert, pyramids rise faintly in moonlight, their outlines patient, unmoving. Temples rest in silence, their statues veiled. The Nile flows steady, carrying dreams northward toward the sea. Everything is calm, everything is safe, everything endures. Breathe gently. Let the rhythm of Egypt be the rhythm of your own rest. The lamps are dim, the river whispers, the stars glow. Our story has reached its end, but its calm remains. If your eyes grow heavy, let them close. If your breath grows slow, let it steady you. You are safe, you are held. You are part of a story that stretches across time. And so, softly we close. Thank you for traveling through Egypt's eternity with me, through pyramids, temples, fields, and seas. If you wish, you may drift further still into the all-night playlist, where more stories wait like lanterns on the river. Or you may simply sleep, wrapped in calm, the Nile flowing gently in your dreams. The story is complete, but the peace endures. Rest now, and let Egypt's eternity be your lullaby.